Hello guys, welcome to Soul Fiction. So in this video, we will see, what if Naruto was the Nephilim? If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. The Weight of the Mist. The world had shrunk to the span of a half-finished bridge in the oppressive, bone-chilling white of the mist. It clung to the skin like a damp shroud, swallowing sound and sight. One moment, Zabuza Momochi stood before them, sword gleaming. The next, Kakashi was gone, his voice suddenly strained, trapped within a sphere of water that bulged like a monstrous eye. Now, Kakashi, let's see you escape my water prison jutsu, Zabuza's voice rasped. Distorted by the fog, he held the sphere with one hand, a casual display of power that locked their Jonin leader in place. But you kids should be more worried about yourselves. From the mist, a second figure emerged, slighter, masked, and radiating a cold that had nothing to do with the damp air. Senbon needles were held delicately between their fingers. Sasuke Uchiha grit his teeth, the Sharingan already spinning in his eyes, its crimson a stark violation of the monochrome landscape. The Tomo tracked the new arrival, Haku, and the hulking form of Zabuza, trying to process a dozen threats at once. Beside him, Sakura moved instinctively, a kunai in her hand as she positioned herself in front of the bridge builder, Tazuna. Her knuckles were as white as the mist. Protect the client, Sasuke bit out. Not a suggestion, but a command born of ingrained mission parameters. His focus was on the enemy. His rival, Naruto, stood on his other side, unnervingly still. He hadn't shouted. He hadn't made a single grand declaration. He just watched. His blue eyes narrowed, scanning the scene with an intensity that seemed out of place on his face. Don't get distracted, Sasuke, Naruto said. His voice low and even. It lacked its usual boisterous edge. He's keeping Kakashi-sensei alive by maintaining the prison. The water clone he sent after us is gone. His real body is over there. He can't move from that spot. Sasuke shot him an irritated glance. I know that. He did, of course. But hearing the obvious, logical breakdown from Naruto of all people was jarring. Zabuza let out a guttural laugh. The little fox is smarter than he looks. But knowing the trap doesn't mean you can escape it. Haku, deal with them. Don't kill them, but make them wish you had. The masked shinobi, Haku, blurred. Not with a flicker technique, but with a sheer velocity that left the air undisturbed. Before Sasuke could fully track the movement, a dome of mirrors, shimmering like frozen mirages, erupted around him and Naruto. They were crystalline, perfectly smooth, and reflected their own trapped images from every angle. The temperature plummeted. Akeke Genkai, Sasuke breathed, his breath misting. He saw Haku's reflection in every single mirror, a dozen identical figures staring back. Be careful, Naruto warned, his body sinking into a low combat stance. This isn't an illusion. The words had barely left his mouth when the reflections moved as one. A volley of Senbon needles shot out from every mirror, a 360-degree assault. There was no angle of escape. Fire style. Fireball jutsu. Sasuke yelled, inhaling sharply and spewing a torrent of flame. The fire spun in their cramped prison, a roaring vortex that met the wave of needles. The Senbon hissed, glowing red-hot before clattering to the ground, their killing potential nullified. But the heat did nothing to the mirrors. They didn't even fog. From one of the mirrors, Haku slipped out, moving at impossible speed. A needle grazed Sasuke's shoulder, not a killing blow, but a precise strike against a pressure point. A numbing cold spread down his arm, making his fingers tingle and his muscles feel sluggish. He spun, swinging a kunai, but Haku was already gone, retreated back into the reflective surface. He's too fast, Sasuke growled, clutching his shoulder. The Sharingan could see Haku's movements. But his body couldn't keep up. It was a maddening disconnect between perception and reaction. Don't try to follow him with your eyes, Naruto said, his gaze unfocused as if he were looking at all the mirrors at once. You'll just get dizzy. Feel the air, the slight shift in temperature before he emerges. Another volley of needles erupted. Naruto moved, not dodging, but flowing between the projectiles. He moved like water, his body twisting and contorting in ways that should have been impossible. A few needles nicked his orange jacket, but none found flesh. He didn't see M to be watching Haku's reflection at all. His eyes were half closed. Sasuke tried to emulate it, to close his eyes and rely on his other senses, but it was a fool's errand. The Sharingan was his greatest weapon. To discard it felt like cutting off a limb. He trusted what he could see. He saw Haku emerge from a mirror to his left and lunged, Chidori crackling to life in his good hand. The sound of 1,000 birds chirping filled the ice dome. His hand plunged forward, aimed straight for Haku's chest. But the figure dissolved like smoke, and Sasuke's attack struck the mirror instead. A web of cracks appeared on its surface. But the mirror held. The impact sent a jarring shockwave up his already numb arm. It was a feint. The real attack came from behind. Pain, sharp and glacial, lanced through his leg. He cried out, stumbling. His Chidori sputtering out, he looked down to see a cluster of Senbon embedded in his thigh, expertly placed to sever muscle control. His leg gave out. Sasuke. Sakura's voice was a terrified cry from outside the dome. He fell to one knee, panting. Haku's voice, serene and melodic, echoed from the mirrors. Your eyes are remarkable. You can see my speed. But speed is meaningless if the body cannot obey. I will not kill you, but I will strip you of your limbs, one by one. Desperation began to claw at Sasuke's composure. He was the Uchiha elite. The last of his clan. He was supposed to be the one to defeat his brother. How could he be dismantled so easily by a masked nobody in this backwater country? He looked over at Naruto, expecting to see panic, or rage. Or the beginnings of that familiar, wild red chakra. He saw none of it. Naruto's head was bowed. His fists were unclenched. His breathing was slow and rhythmic. The air around him felt heavy. The frenetic energy he normally radiated was gone, replaced by a profound, unnerving stillness. It was like standing at the heart of a hurricane, a pocket of absolute calm surrounded by impending destruction. Enough, Naruto said. The word wasn't shouted. It was barely more than a whisper, yet it cut through the dome, silencing the echo of Haku's voice. Naruto lifted his head. The change was immediate and terrifying. His right eye was no longer the familiar ocean blue. It blazed with a light that seemed stolen from the sun, a pure, molten gold that radiated a palpable warmth. His left eye was a mirror image of the Kyuubi's. A slit pupil of darkest crimson swimming in a sea of blood, but it held none of the fox's mindless rage. It was cold, analytical, and utterly predatory. The whisker marks on his cheeks deepened, seeming less like scars and more like cracks in a facade, revealing something ancient and powerful beneath. A pressure, immense and twofold, descended upon the ice dome. One side was a comforting, life-affirming warmth, like the first day of spring. The other was an abyssal chill that promised utter annihilation. The two forces swirled around him, held in a perfect, impossible balance. Sasuke stared, his Sharingan automatically trying to analyze the phenomenon. He saw chakra, yes, but it wasn't just the red of the Kyuubi. He saw a second, golden energy, coiling around the red like a twin serpent. It was dense, pure, and felt older than the very rocks of the bridge. You have heard my friend, Naruto stated, his voice a disquieting harmony of two distinct tones, one that resonated with warmth and life. The other a low, guttural growl. He pushed himself up from his crouch, his movements fluid and deliberate. You have threatened my team. Your game is over. Haku's reflection flickered in the mirrors. The serene confidence wavering for the first time. What are you? Naruto ignored the question. He looked at Sasuke, his mismatched eyes pinning him in place. On your feet, Sasuke. Your leg is useless, but your arms are not. Do exactly as I say. The command was absolute. There was no room for argument. Sasuke found himself nodding, pushing himself up with his good leg, his mind reeling. This wasn't Naruto. This was something else wearing his face. The mirrors are connected by a path of chakra, Naruto explained, his golden eye tracking invisible lines in the air. It's how he moves between them. It's a closed circuit, but every circuit has a master node. One mirror that acts as the anchor for the entire jutsu. He pointed a single finger towards a mirror directly above them. That one. Sasuke looked up. It looked identical to all the others. How do you know? I can see it, Naruto said simply. The crimson eye seemed to pierce through the physical world. seeing the flow of energy that was invisible to the Sharingan. The chakra is thickest there. Now, listen. He attacks by creating a vacuum. He uses the temperature difference inside and outside the mirror to propel himself. That's why it feels like the air is shifting just before he appears. This was impossible. Genin didn't analyze jutsu on this level. Even Kakashi would need time to deduce such mechanics. Yet Naruto was speaking with utter certainty. I'm going to draw his attention, Naruto continued, his voice dropping lower. When I do, he will appear in the mirror to your direct right. He will be focused on me. You will have less than half a second. Hit that mirror with your strongest fireball jutsu. Don't aim for him. Aim for the mirror itself. The sudden temper. Change will create a micro fracture. It won't be enough to break it, but it will be enough to disrupt the chakra flow for an instant. And what will you be doing? Sasuke asked, his voice tight. A faint, dangerous smile touched Naruto's lips. I'll be waiting for that instant. Without another word, Naruto vanished. Not with a burst of speed, but by taking a single, casual step forward and simply not being there anymore. Sasuke's Sharingan whirled, trying to find him. He was nowhere. Then, a sharp crack echoed through the dome. Naruto had appeared before the mirror on the far side, his fist buried to the wrist in its surface. The ice screamed and fractured, but held. Haku's reflections all turned to face him. Impossible. No one is that fast. You rely on a single trick, Naruto's dual-toned voice echoed. He pulled his fist back, his knuckles bleeding. You are fast inside your cage. But you are still in a cage. As Naruto had predicted, Haku's true body materialized in the mirror to Sasuke's right. Needles already in hand, his full attention on the immediate, shocking threat Naruto posed. Now, Sasuke didn't hesitate. He forced himself to ignore the pain in his leg, drew a massive breath, and poured every last bit of his remaining chakra into the technique. Fire style. Fireball jutsu. A colossal sphere of orange flame erupted from his mouth, far larger and more intense than his earlier attempt. It wasn't aimed at Haku, but at the reflective surface of the mirror, just as Naruto had ordered. The fireball slammed into the ice with a deafening roar. The mirror glowed, turning from translucent white to a brilliant, molten orange. It didn't shatter, but a high-pitched whine filled the air as the intricate chakra matrix within it warped under the thermal stress. For a fraction of a second, the flow of energy between the mirrors stuttered. It was all the time Naruto needed. He moved from across the dome, appearing in front of Haku's mirror in the space between heartbeats. He wasn't running. It was more like he was pulled forward by an unseen force. In his right hand, a swirling ball of golden energy materialized, bright and warm like a miniature sun. In his left, a sphere of roiling, violet-black chakra crackled, emanating a feeling of absolute emptiness. He didn't try to merge them. He thrust both hands forward, one on either side of Haku's emerging form. The golden energy struck the mirror's surface to the right, the dark energy to the left. The effect was instantaneous and catastrophic. The golden energy didn't shatter the ice, it sublimated it. Mirror dissolved into a cloud of shimmering, harmless mist, the chakra that composed it simply ceasing to exist. The dark energy had the opposite effect. It didn't just break the mirror, it devoured it. The ice turned black, crumbling into a fine, ash-like powder that was sucked into the void of Naruto's attack. Haku was caught between the two forces. The jutsu, its anchor point and circuit broken, collapsed. The remaining mirrors dissolved, shattering into a cascade of glittering ice shards that rained down on the bridge. Haku was thrown from the now non-existent mirror, tumbling through the air. His technique and his momentum broken. Naruto was already there, catching him by the front of his shirt. He slammed Haku down onto the bridge, his knee pressed firmly against the masked shinobi's chest. The golden and red light in his eyes slowly receded, leaving behind his normal, bright blue irises. But the cold intensity remained. He raised a hand, fingers curled into a fist. Sasuke tensed, expecting a killing blow. Sakura screamed a warning from outside. Naruto's hand came down, but it wasn't a punch. With two precise, deliberate finger strikes, he jabbed Haku's shoulder and wrist. There was a faint snap. Haku cried out, his arm going limp, the senbon needles scattering across the bridge. The fight was over. Haku lay on the ground, defeated and disarmed, his mask cracked, revealing a surprisingly young, feminine face beneath. He was breathing hard, staring up at Naruto with wide, terrified eyes. Naruto stood up, his expression unreadable. He looked at Sasuke, who was still on the ground, staring in stunned silence. "Can you stand?" Sasuke could only nod, his mind a whirlwind of confusion, awe, and a bitter, burning jealousy that tasted like ash in his mouth. What he had just witnessed defied every law of chakra he had ever learned. It wasn't ninjutsu. It was something else entirely. Something primal. From across the bridge, the mist began to thin. Zabuza stood frozen, his hand still holding the water prison. He had seen the entire exchange. The collapse of the mirrors, the flash of gold and black, the instantaneous defeat of his most precious tool. His grip on the prison wavered, the water sloshing. Kakashi, seeing his chance, flexed his chakra, shattering the weakened jutsu from the inside. "Well now," Kakashi said, water dripping from his clothes as he stepped forward. His single visible eye narrowed, fixed not on Zabuza, but on his blonde student. That was unexpected. The air was thick with unspoken questions. Sakura and Tazuna rushed over, their faces pale. Sakura fussed over Sasuke's injuries, but her eyes kept flicking nervously towards Naruto, as if seeing him for the first time. Zabuza let out a low growl, his killing intent flooding the bridge once more. "Haku, you failed." Haku flinched at the words, shame and pain warring in his eyes. "The boy is mine, Kakashi," Zabuza snarled, his gaze locked on Naruto. "What is he? No mere Jinchuriki has that kind of power. That light, it felt like poison to a demon like me." Before Kakashi could answer, a slow, mocking clap echoed from the end of the bridge. A short, impeccably dressed man with a cane, Gato, emerged from the mist. Flanked by 100 armed thugs and rogue samurai. "Bravo, Zabuza, what a delightful show," Gato sneered. "But your contract has been terminated. I've decided to save some money. Why pay elite ninja when I can just have this small army kill you all, including Tazuna, once you're weakened?" Zabuza's eyes widened in fury. "Gato, you dare betray me?" "Business is business," Gato shrugged. "Kill them all. The one with the whiskers is probably worth the most." The thugs charged, a wave of steel and angry yells. Sakura and Sasuke prepared for another fight, but their chakra was low. Their bodies battered. Kakashi stepped in front of them, kunai at the ready. Naruto, however, didn't even look at the charging mob. His attention was on Zabuza, and on the defeated Haku who was now struggling to rise. Intent on protecting his master even in his state. Naruto saw the flicker of emotion in Zabuza's eyes as he looked at his young apprentice, a flicker of something other than cold ambition. "He was your tool," Naruto said quietly to Zabuza, his voice back to normal, yet carrying a new weight. "But he was more than that to you, wasn't he?" Zabuza just grunted, grabbing his massive executioner's blade. Naruto sighed. He turned to face the oncoming horde, and for a moment, Sasuke saw the briefest flash of gold in his right eye again. Naruto raised a single hand, weaving a sign Sasuke didn't recognize. "Don't waste your strength," Naruto said to Kakashi over his shoulder. "This won't take long." He slammed his palm onto the bridge. Shadow clone jutsu. It wasn't the usual explosion of smoke. The mist itself seemed to congeal, swirling around Naruto before erupting outwards. 100 Narutos materialized on the bridge, then 200, then 500. They filled the entire span. A silent, disciplined army, each one with the same calm, serious expression. They stood shoulder to shoulder, a living wall of orange and blue. The charging thugs skidded to a halt, their bravado evaporating in the face of the impossible. Gato's jaw dropped. "Go," the real Naruto ordered. The army of clones surged forward, and the bridge descended into chaos. And in the steel girders beneath the bridge, a figure in a blank white mask and a black cloak watched the battle conclude. He had seen it all. The boy's strange transformation, the dual energies, the impossible speed. And the strategic mind that directed the Uchiha. He had felt the wave of celestial power, and it had made the seal tattooed on his tongue burn with a cold fire. He made no move to interfere. His mission was observation only. He drew a small, featureless scroll and a brush. With practiced, emotionless strokes, he began to write his report. Target designation: Uzumaki Naruto. Jinchuriki status confirmed. Threat assessment. Insufficient. He paused, recalling the golden eye and the abyssal darkness. He recalled the way reality itself seemed to bend around the boy for a fleeting moment. He dipped his brush again, striking through his last sentence. He wrote a new one. Anomaly confirmed. Power signature consistent with celestial abyssal fusion. Precognition, spatial distortion. Energy manipulation beyond known parameters of Jinchuriki transformation. The Kyuubi is not a guardian, it is a component. He stopped, his hand hovering over the scroll. The term they had used in the archives. The forbidden name whispered only in the deepest vaults of Root, came to his mind. It was a word from an age of myths, a time before chakra was understood, a time of gods and monsters. With grim certainty, he added the final line to his report. Classification upgrade required. Designate subject as Nephilim. Standard containment protocols are void. Recommend immediate activation of purification protocol. He rolled the scroll, sealed it, and melted back into the shadows, his presence on the bridge vanishing as if it had never been. The screams of Gato's men above were nothing more than background noise. A far more important conflict was about to begin. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. The Whispering Forest. The air in the forest of death was thick and wet, smelling of damp earth and rot. It was a living thing, this forest. It watched them through the knotty eyes of ancient trees and whispered through the rustle of unseen things in the undergrowth. A towering, 30-foot fence loomed behind them. The gates now shut and sealed. 44 hours. That's how long they had to survive this place, find a rival team with the opposite scroll, and make it to the tower in the center. It's so wounded, so simple when Anko Mitarashi had explained it with that sadistic grin on her face. Standing here, with the oppressive canopy blotting out the sun, it felt like a death sentence. Sakura shivered, clutching the heaven scroll they'd been issued. I don't like this place. It feels hungry. Stay sharp, Sasuke said, his eyes scanning the gloom. The Sharingan was a dormant threat, ready to be unleashed. He was different since the Land of Waves. Quieter, more intense. His gaze kept flicking to Naruto, a complicated mix of distrust and a strange, grudging respect. He hadn't asked a single question about what had happened on the bridge. Not one. The silence was louder than any interrogation. Naruto, for his part, was an infuriating ball of energy. He had strapped their scroll to his baka. ND was practically bouncing on the balls of his feet. All right, let's go find some enemies, grab their scroll, and get to the tower. Believe it, it was the same old Naruto, loud and ridiculously optimistic. But it wasn't. The act was just a little too perfect. Beneath the wide grin and the boisterous shouts, his eyes were constantly moving, not with the unfocused excitement of a child, but with the sharp, economical movements of a predator assessing its territory. He noticed the snap of a twig to their left, the unnatural silence of the birds overhead, the way the moss grew thicker on the north side of the trees. He was mapping the forest in his head, and Sasuke knew it. It was galling. Idiot. Don't yell, Sasuke snapped, the familiar insult feeling hollow. You'll attract every team in a 5-mile radius. Maybe that's the point, Naruto shot back, though there was no real heat in it. Saves us the trouble of hunting them down. He was right, of course. A direct, aggressive strategy was just as valid as a stealthy one. That was the most frustrating part. Naruto's simple-minded plans often had a core of brutal, effective logic. They moved for an hour, a tense, silent procession. Naruto took the lead, his senses seemingly sharper than even Sasuke's. He guided them around a patch of giant leeches and a clearing filled with pollen that smelled deceptively sweet. He didn't explain how he knew. He just knew. The first attack came without warning. A sudden gust of wind, a blur of motion, and a volley of Senbon laced with a paralytic poison. Naruto, who had been in mid-stride, dropped and rolled, coming up with a kunai already in his hand to deflect a second volley aimed at Sakura. 3 shinobi from a Megakure, the village hidden in the rain, dropped from the trees, their breather masks giving them an insectoid appearance. The heaven scroll, the leader hissed. Hand it over, and we'll make this quick. Sasuke's Sharingan flared to life. You want it? Come and get it. He darted forward, but Naruto was already moving, his plan unfolding with startling speed. Sasuke, left flank, Sakura, cover Tazuna. Cover our 6. Distraction. He threw 3 kunai, not at the ninja, but at a thick, heavy branch above their heads. The branch, weakened by rot, groaned and snapped, crashing down and forcing the aim nin to scatter. It was a simple, elegant tactic. It created chaos, separated the enemy, and gave his team an opening. In the split second the aim nin were divided, Naruto was on the one on the right. He didn't use a flashy jutsu. He used a textbook leg sweep, followed by a precise elbow strike to the ninja's mask, shattering the rebreather. The man choked, disoriented. Sasuke, meanwhile, engaged the leader. Their battle was a flash of steel and fire. He was faster, his Sharingan predicting the aim nin's moves, but the man was slippery, using the environment to his advantage. The third aim nin lunged for Sakura, only to be caught in a pre-laid wire trap. Naruto must have set the moment the fight began. He was hoisted into the air, dangling upside down. Sakura, seizing the opportunity, finished it with a powerful punch that sent him crashing into a tree trunk. Naruto finished his opponent, a quick clone feint and a solid kick to the head, knocking the man unconscious. He grabbed the man's earth scroll, then turned to see Sasuke drive the A.M.E. leader back with a searing fireball jutsu. The leader, scorched and outmatched, threw down a smoke bomb and retreated into the forest. The entire engagement had lasted less than a minute. Naruto spelled his clone and held up the earth scroll, grinning. See, 2 scrolls, easy peasy. Sasuke stared at him, breathing hard. Naruto hadn't used any strange powers. He hadn't flashed those terrifying eyes. He had fought like a competent, well-trained shinobi. He had used teamwork, strategy, and misdirection. And he had done it better than him. The victory felt more like a defeat. This new, Kappa, Naruto was a far greater challenge to his pride than the old, idiotic one. You got lucky, Sasuke muttered, deactivating his Sharingan. Luck is a skill, Naruto retorted cheerfully, tucking the second scroll away. Now, let's get to the tower before. He stopped mid-sentence. His head snapped up. The cheerful mask fell away, replaced by the same unnerving calm he'd worn on the bridge. The forest had gone completely, deathly silent. Not even the insects were buzzing. A pressure descended on the clearing, a palpable killing intent so thick it felt like wading through tar. It was suffocating, ancient, evil. A gust of wind, far stronger than before, tore through the clearing, kicking up leaves and dirt. It wasn't a natural wind. It was laced with chakra, sharp and cutting. It ripped a deep gash in the tree beside Sakura. Then, he was there. He hadn't appeared in a swirl of leaves or a flicker of movement. He simply coalesced from the shadows, a tall, pale figure with golden, slitted eyes that promised a world of pain. His long black hair framed a face that was both beautiful and reptilian. The air around him shimmered with power. Orochimaru, one of the legendary Sannin. His long, unnaturally flexible tongue snaked out, swiping across his lips as his gaze settled on them. No, not on them. On Naruto. Well, Orochimaru hissed, his voice like the dry rustle of snakeskin. I felt a fascinating tremor all the way from the land of waves. A little spark of divinity and a great, yawning abyss, all wrapped up in one loud, orange package. I just had to come and see for myself. Sasuke froze. This presence, it was on a completely different level from Zabuza. This was a true monster. His body screamed at him to run, but his legs were locked in place by pure, primal fear. Who are you? Sakura stammered, her face ashen. Orochimaru's gaze flickered to Sasuke, a flicker of interest in his eyes. An Uchiha, a fine specimen, but not what I came for. His attention snapped back to Naruto. You, boy, show me what you really are. Naruto pushed Sakura and Sasuke behind him, his body a tense line. The easygoing attitude was gone, replaced by a cold, hard focus that made him seem older. Get back, you're out of your league. Indeed, they are, Orochimaru chuckled. He moved, a blur that even Sasuke's newly activated Sharingan could barely follow. He appeared in front of Naruto, his hand outstretched. Naruto reacted on pure instinct. He ducked under the grasp, lashing out with a kick. Orochimaru caught his leg, his grip like iron. With a flick of his wrist, he sent Naruto flying. Naruto twisted in midair, landing on his feet, but the force of the throw had been immense. Resistant, Orochimaru mused, his smile widening. Good. He lunged again. What followed was not a fight. It was a dissection. Orochimaru moved with a liquid grace, his every strike precise and probing. He tested Naruto's speed, his strength, his reflexes. Naruto fought back with everything he had, clones, substitution jutsus, taijutsu, but it was like a child fighting a tidal wave. He was utterly, completely outmatched. Orochimaru drove a fist into Naruto's gut. The boy doubled over, coughing up blood. The Sannin grabbed him by the hair, lifting him off the ground. Is this all? Orochimaru whispered, his voice laced with disappointment. I expected more. I felt the power that shattered Haku's little ice trick. The power that devoured and created in the same breath. Are you too afraid to use it? Or too stupid? He slammed Naruto into the ground, the impact shaking the trees. Show it to me. Show me the power of a Nephilim. Sasuke could only watch, paralyzed. This was the gulf between them and a legend. He was useless. Sakura was useless. And Naruto was being systematically broken. From the crater, Naruto pushed himself up, blood dripping from his mouth. His eyes were blazing with fury. A faint, red aura began to leak from him, the familiar, malevolent chakra of the Nine Tails. Ah, there it is, Orochimaru purred. The power of the demon. But that's only half of the equation, isn't it? Where is the other side? The light that made Zabuza recoil. He disappeared and reappeared behind Sasuke, a kunai pressed to his throat. Perhaps your friends need some motivation. Sasuke. Sakura screamed. Naruto's head snapped towards them. He saw the blade at Sasuke's neck. Saw Sakura's terrified face. And something inside him broke. Get away from them. He roared. The red chakra exploded outwards, no longer a leak but a torrent. Yes, that's it. Orochimaru hissed in delight. Show me more. He kicked Sasuke aside and made a series of hand signs. Wind release. Great breakthrough. A hurricane of wind erupted from Orochimaru's mouth, a solid wall of razor-sharp air that shredded the ground and flattened trees. It wasn't an attack meant to disable. It was an attack meant to annihilate. There was nowhere to run. Sakura screamed, shielding her face. Sasuke braced for the impact, knowing it was the end. But the impact never came. There was a sound like tearing fabric, and a sudden, immense shadow fell over them. Sasuke looked up and his blood ran cold. Naruto stood in front of them, his back to the wind blast. And from his left shoulder blade, a single, massive wing had erupted. It was not made of feathers, but of pure, solidified shadow and crackling, crimson energy. It was vast, membranous like a bat's, and it absorbed the entirety of Orochimaru's jutsu without a tremor. The wind howled and died against its impossible form. The red chakra around Naruto receded. Drawn into the wing, his eyes were wide, not with rage, but with shock and fear at his own involuntary transformation. He looked down at the shadowy appendage as if it were a parasite. The forest fell silent once more. Sakura was staring, her mouth agape in pure terror. This was not a jutsu. This was a mutation, a monstrosity. Sasuke's mind reeled. A wing, a literal, physical wing made of darkness. This was the source of his power. He wasn't just a Jinchuriki. He was a monster. The jealousy that had been simmering within him was now tainted with a new, potent emotion, fear. Orochimaru was ecstatic. His face was flushed with a terrifying, scientific lust. Sublime, absolutely sublime, to manifest the abyssal half so perfectly. You were the ultimate specimen. He shot forward, his neck elongating, his mouth stretching impossibly wide. His fangs, coated in a venomous purple chakra, aimed for Naruto's shoulder. He was going to brand him, to claim this magnificent power for himself. Naruto tried to move, to bring the wing around to defend himself, but he was exhausted, his body trembling from the partial transformation. He couldn't stop the attack. The fangs sank into his flesh. Pain, white-hot and searing, shot through Naruto's body. A black, tomo-like pattern began to spread from the bite, the seal of the curse mark. But then, something else happened. From the right side of Naruto's body, a brilliant, golden light erupted. It was the same celestial energy from the bridge, pure and incandescent. It surged towards the curse mark, not as an attack, but as a cleansing fire. It was the antithesis of Orochimaru's corrupted, twisted sage art. Light against shadow, purity against defilement. Orochimaru shrieked, a high, unholy sound of agony. He recoiled as if he'd been burned. Smoke rising from his mouth. The curse mark on Naruto's shoulder didn't just stop spreading, it sizzled and dissolved, violently ejected from his system by a power that would not tolerate its presence. The wound from the bite healed in a flash of golden light, leaving unmarked skin behind. Naruto collapsed to his knees, panting, the shadowy wing dissolving back into his body. He was spent. Orochimaru clutched his face, his golden eyes filled with pain and utter disbelief. It purges it. The celestial half rejects my seal as a foreign body. Magnificent. His gaze was wild with obsession. He took a step forward, then hesitated, looking at his smoking hands. He had been wounded by the backlash. He took the earth scroll from the unconscious Nin's pouch, then looked back at the trio. His eyes lingered on Sasuke for a long moment, a new plan already forming in his mind. This changes things, Orochimaru whispered to himself. The container is too strong to take directly. But perhaps, a rival is what's needed to cultivate it. He gave Sasuke a final, predatory smile before melting back into the forest, his chilling laughter echoing behind him. The clearing was a wreck. Trees were flattened. The ground was torn apart. The three genin were left in the suffocating silence. Sakura finally found her voice, a choked sob of terror. Sasuke pushed himself to his feet, his body shaking. His mind a chaotic storm. He looked at Naruto, who was still on his knees, struggling to breathe. He saw the torn orange jacket, the lingering smell of ozone and something ancient and dark, and the undeniable truth. Naruto Uzumaki was not his rival. He was not even human. He was something else. Something that could grow wings of shadow and radiate the light of the sun. And Sasuke, for the first time in his life, felt truly, hopelessly outclassed. The path to his brother, to revenge, suddenly seemed impossibly long. But Orochimaru's last look had planted a seed. A dark, tempting seed of power. A power that might, just might, let him stand on the same level as the monster before him. The bond of Team 7 had not just been tested. It had been irrevocably shattered and made into something new and dangerous. A partnership born of fear, envy, and a terrifying, shared secret. Outside the forest, at the base of the tower, a sensor nin in Anko's command post jolted. Commander, a massive chakra spike from Sector Gamma 7. 2 signatures. One is, it's Lord Orochimaru. The other, I don't know what it is. It's like nothing I've ever seen before. It felt like a demon and something holy, all at once. Anko's blood ran cold. She stared at the forest, her hand unconsciously drifting to the curse mark on her own neck. A monster was loose in her exam. And it seemed, he had just found a far more interesting one to play with. Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. A Cage of Sand and Sky. The month-long respite between the preliminary and final rounds was a festering wound. Team 7 did not heal. It scarred. They trained separately, a trio of atoms split by a terrifying reaction, repelling one another with the unspoken truth of what they had witnessed in the forest. Kakashi had tried to breach the silence. He found Naruto atop the Hokage monument one evening, staring down at the village lights. The loud, orange jacket seemed like a desperate attempt to pretend he was the same boy from a month ago. Naruto, Kakashi had started, his voice gentle. About the forest. About your power. What about it? Naruto didn't look at him. His voice was flat. I'm the Kyuubi's container. Sometimes I lose control. You've known that since we met. It was a lie. A carefully constructed wall of a lie. What they had seen was not a loss of control. It was the emergence of a different control. Something ancient and deliberate. The wing of shadow had been a shield, not a mindless rampage. The golden light that purged Orochimaru's curse had been a precise, almost sentient defense. That wasn't the Nine Tails. Kakashi pressed, leaning against the railing. I've seen its chakra before. This was different. The wing. I don't want to talk about it. Naruto cut him off, his tone leaving no room for argument. He stood up. I've got training to do. Gotta get ready for my match against Neji. And with a dismissive wave, he was gone in a flicker, leaving Kakashi alone with the ghosts. of his own past and the terrifying questions about his student's future. He found Sasuke at the Uchiha training grounds, his kunai and shuriken striking their targets with a vicious, obsessive precision. The boy was driving himself to the brink of exhaustion. But when Kakashi offered to train him, to teach him the Chidori, Sasuke's acceptance was cold and immediate. He didn't want a teacher, he wanted a tool. He wanted a weapon to close the impossible gap he now perceived between himself and Naruto. Kakashi agreed, partly out of a sense of duty to his last Uchiha student, but mostly because it was the only way to keep the boy's simmering darkness from boiling over. It was better to keep him close than to let him seek power elsewhere. Sakura threw herself into her studies, spending her days in the library, poring over scrolls about Kekkei Genkai, mutations, and forbidden jutsu. She found nothing that could explain a boy who could sprout wings of shadow. Her fear had curdled into a kind of academic terror. She treated Naruto with a wide-eyed caution, as if he were an unstable explosive she was forced to handle. The easy camaraderie of their team was dead, buried in the dark soil of the forest of death. Naruto wasn't alone for long. A few days into his self-imposed training, a man with a wild mane of white hair and a mischievous grin found him at a ramen stand. He was loud, boisterous, and introduced himself as the great toad sage, Jiraiya. Naruto knew who he was. The third Hokage had spoken of him. Another of the legendary Sannin. Jiraiya's stated purpose was to train Naruto to control the Kyuubi's chakra. His true purpose was far more clandestine. Hiruzen Sarutobi, having been briefed by a shaken Anko and reviewing the censor logs from the exam, had summoned his old student back to the village. The energy signature that had repelled Orochimaru was not demonic. It was something else, something the old Hokage had only read about in the Uzumaki clan's most secret archives before their destruction. So Jiraiya trained him. He taught Naruto the summoning jutsu and started him on the long, arduous path to the Rasengan. But all the while, he watched. He probed. He pushed Naruto's chakra to its limits, carefully documenting the boy's unusual resilience, his preternatural senses, and the faint, almost undetectable golden hue that would sometimes flicker in his chakra coils when he was exhausted. He was studying the Nephilim, trying to understand the nature of the beast and the angel bound in a single, human cage. The month passed like a fever dream. And then, the day of the finals arrived. The stadium was a colossal bowl, packed to the brim with cheering civilians, foreign dignitaries, and shinobi from every nation. The air crackled with anticipation. Naruto's match was the first. He stood in the center of the arena, the roar of the crowd a distant hum. Across from him, Neji Hyuga stood with his arms crossed, his pale Byakugan eyes regarding Naruto not as a rival, but as a contaminant. So, the failure from the bottom of the class made it to the finals, Neji said, his voice carrying easily across the silent arena. Proof that even a broken clock is right twice a day. Save the talk, Neji, Naruto replied, his voice calm. Let's just get this over with. Oh, but I have a great deal to say, Neji countered, a condescending smirk on his face. I have observed you. There is a power within you that is not your own. A borrowed, filthy power that you cling to because you are too weak to stand on your own merits. You rage against your station, pretending you can change your destiny. It is pathetic. He activated his Byakugan, the veins around his temples bulging. His gaze intensified, and for a moment, he seemed to recoil. He could see it, not just the raging crimson of the Kyuubi, but the serene, blinding gold of the celestial energy, coiled around Naruto's chakra pathways like a divine parasite. What an abomination, Neji whispered, his voice dripping with disgust. You are a stain upon the natural order. A contradiction that should not exist. The destiny of a failure is to fail. The destiny of a monster is to be put down. It is all preordained. The crowd murmured, confused by the philosophical turn. But Naruto understood perfectly. This wasn't about their skills as shinobi. This was about their very existence. Naruto looked up, his blue eyes meeting Neji's pale ones. He didn't shout. He didn't rage. A cold, hard certainty settled over him. You're wrong, Neji, Naruto said, his voice clear and sharp, cutting through the stadium's noise. You talk about destiny as if it's a cage everyone is born into. You look at the world through the bars of your own cage, the Hyuga's curse mark, and you assume everyone else is just as trapped as you are. Neji's smirk faltered. My power isn't borrowed, Naruto continued, taking a step forward. It is me, and it doesn't fit into your neat little boxes of fate and bloodlines. You want to know my destiny? I don't have one. I'm not a page in your book. I'm the one who's going to burn the whole library down. The proctor, Genma, sighed, a senbon twitching in his mouth. Are you two done? If so, begin. Neji didn't hesitate. He shot forward, his movements a symphony of deadly grace. Gentle fist. His open palms struck out, aiming for the tenketsu points in Naruto's chest. But Naruto moved. He didn't dodge in the conventional sense. He shifted his weight, his body moving just enough for Neji's precision strikes to slide past, missing their targets by a hair's breadth. It wasn't the Sharingan's prediction. It was something more instinctual. A profound spatial awareness. Neji pressed his attack, his speed increasing. 8 trigrams 64 palms. A flurry of strikes rained down on Naruto. 2 palms. 4 palms. 8 palms. Naruto was on the defensive, his arms a blur as he deflected and parried. He wasn't using the gentle fist's defensive style, he was using a raw, kinetic force. Meeting Neji's chakra-infused jabs with hard, physical blocks. 16 palms. 32 palms. A strike finally connected, hitting Naruto's shoulder. Neji smirked, expecting the chakra pathway to be sealed. But he felt a jarring feedback, as if he had struck solid steel. Naruto barely flinched. The abyssal half of his nature, the demonic resilience, made his body far more durable than any ordinary human's. 64 palms. Neji finished, his final strike aimed at Naruto's heart. Naruto caught his wrist. Neji's eyes widened in shock. No one had ever just stopped the final blow. Naruto's grip was like iron. A faint, golden light pulsed from Naruto's skin, and Neji felt the numbing effect of his own gentle fist being actively purged from Naruto's system. My turn, Naruto said, his voice low. He twisted, pulling Neji off balance, and drove his other fist into the Hyuga's stomach. It wasn't a chakra-infused punch. It was a pure, brutal application of physical force. The air exploded from Neji's lungs. He was sent flying backwards, tumbling across the arena floor. He staggered to his feet, coughing, his arrogant composure shattered. How can you resist the gentle fist? Your technique is designed to attack the cage, Naruto said, walking towards him. But I told you, I don't live in one. He formed a cross-shaped seal. Shadow clone jutsu. 5 clones appeared, and they swarmed Neji from all angles. Neji responded with his ultimate defense. 8 trigrams palms revolving heaven. He spun, a whirlwind of pure chakra erupting from his body, creating an impenetrable dome that sent the clones flying apart in puffs of smoke. When the spinning stopped, Neji was panting, but confident once more. No one could breach his absolute defense. The real Naruto was standing right in front of him. Inside his guard, Neji's blood ran cold. He hadn't seen him move. Naruto had used the clones as a feint, moving in under the cover of the initial chakra blast before the dome had fully formed. Naruto drew his fist back. This is for believing in cages. He drove an uppercut into Neji's jaw. The Hyuga's head snapped back, and he flew into the air, landing in a crumpled heap on the ground. Unconscious. Silence. The entire stadium was silent. Then, it erupted into a deafening roar. Naruto stood over his defeated opponent, his expression not triumphant, but somber. He had won, but he had taken no pleasure in breaking Neji's philosophy. Genma raised his hand. Winner, Naruto Uzumaki. As Naruto walked off the field, Sasuke watched from the competitor's box. His fists clenched so tight his knuckles were white. It was happening again. Naruto was growing, evolving at a rate that was simply impossible. Then, chaos erupted. A genjutsu swept over the stadium, white feathers falling from the sky, putting the civilian population to sleep. Explosions rocked the arena walls. Sand and sound shinobi poured in from the gates, kunai and swords drawn. The Konoha crush had begun. The cage, sitting beside the third Hokage, rose and seized him, leaping to the roof of the arena. A shimmering purple barrier erected around them. It was Orochimaru. Sasuke. Kakashi appeared beside him. The invasion is a distraction. The real target is you. I need you to go after Gaara and the Sand siblings. Stop them. I'll release you from the genjutsu. Sasuke nodded, his mind racing. This was his chance, a real battle to prove himself. As he leapt into the forest, chasing the fleeing sand team, another figure landed beside him. It was Naruto. Thought you could use some help, Naruto said. I don't need your help, Sasuke snarled. Not about you, Naruto shot back. That Gaara guy, there's something wrong with him. Something broken. We have to stop him before he does something he can't take back. Their chase was short-lived. They cornered Gaara in the forest, but it was too late. The boy was already succumbing to the beast within. His body was distorting, sand covering him like a grotesque shell. Sasuke engaged him, his Sharingan and the new speed from Kakashi's training giving him an edge. He was faster, stronger than he'd been in the forest. He even managed to wound Gaara with a Chidori. But it wasn't enough. Gaara's transformation escalated, his control snapping. A giant arm of sand erupted, slamming Sasuke into a tree with bone-crushing force. He slumped to the ground, his arm broken, his body battered. He was out of the fight. From the ground, he watched as Gaara's transformation completed. The sand coalesced into a monstrous, giant tanuki, the one-tailed Shukaku. It roared, a sound of pure madness and destruction. Naruto stood before it, looking small and insignificant. This is it, Sasuke thought, a bitter taste in his mouth. He's going to do it again. He's going to unleash that other power. But Naruto didn't. He didn't sprout wings. His eyes didn't change. He just stood there, watching the raging beast. He could feel its emotions, not just rage, but a profound, soul-deep loneliness and a searing pain. It was the pain of a child who had never known love, only fear. It was a pain he understood all too well. He bit his thumb, summoning Gamabunta. The ensuing battle of titans shook the forest. But even the chief toad was outmatched by the raw, untamed power of the Biju. Then Naruto did something insane. He leapt from Gamabunta's head, straight at the raging Shukaku. Naruto, you fool, Sasuke yelled, trying to get up, but the pain was too great. Naruto landed on the monster's chest. He placed his palm flat against the sand-caked hide. And he closed his eyes. He didn't try to fight the monster. He bypassed it. A gentle, warm, golden energy flowed from his hand, not attacking Shukaku's chakra, but sinking through it. Searching for the boy trapped inside the cage of sand. He projected his consciousness, diving headfirst into Gaara's tormented mind. He found himself in a vast, dark desert under a bleeding moon. Shukaku was there, a mountain of rage, screaming and clawing at invisible walls. But Naruto ignored it. He walked past the demon, towards a small figure huddled in the distance. It was Gaara as a child, weeping, alone in the darkness. Naruto didn't say a word. He just sat down in front of the boy. From his own being, he radiated a feeling, not pity, but understanding. He showed the young Gaara his O.W.N. memories. The lonely nights in his empty apartment, the hateful glares of the villagers, the sting of being utterly alone. Then, he reached deeper. His celestial power, a power of empathy and connection, resonated with the very sand around them. He found what he was looking for, a flicker of warmth buried beneath decades of pain. A memory, the image of a woman with red hair, her hands glowing as she pressed them to her swollen belly. Pouring all of her love, all of her will to protect her unborn child, into the sand that would one day become his shield. Karura, his mother, she loved you, Naruto projected, not in words, but in pure feeling. The sand doesn't protect you because of the demon. It protects you because of her. You were never truly alone. The feeling, the undeniable truth of a mother's love, washed over the child Gaara. The weeping stopped. The darkness in the mindscape lightened. The raging Shukaku faltered, its roars quieting to confused grumbles as the anger that fueled it simply evaporated. Back in the real world, the effect was immediate. The colossal sand monster froze. Cracks appeared all over its body. With a final, sorrowful groan, it crumbled into a mountain of inert sand, revealing Gaara. Unconscious and peaceful, at its center. Naruto fell to his knees, the mental and spiritual exertion leaving him utterly drained. Temari and Kankuro arrived, staring in shock at their transformed brother. Now defeated, they grabbed him and retreated, their mission a failure. The forest fell silent. Sasuke stared, his broken body forgotten. Naruto hadn't won with a bigger fist or a stronger jutsu. He had won with empathy. He had defeated a Biju by talking to the boy inside. It was a power Sasuke couldn't comprehend, could never hope to attain. It was a power that made his Chidori, his Sharingan, his entire quest for vengeance, feel like a child's tantrum. Later, as the dust settled over a wounded Konoha, the news spread like wildfire. The third Hokage was dead. Orochimaru had escaped. The sand and sound had retreated. The village was safe, but at a terrible cost. From a shadowed rooftop overlooking the chaos, Danzo Shimura stood with two of his most elite root agents. He had watched the entire battle through the eyes of his operatives. He had seen Naruto's victory over the Hyuga prodigy, and he had received the report about what had happened in the forest. He did not use the wing. One agent reported. No, Danzo said, his one visible eye narrowed. He used something far more dangerous. He communed with the Biju. He pacified it. He is learning to control not just his own power, but the power of others. His gaze shifted to the Hokage Tower, now a place of mourning, its seat of power empty. Hiruzen's sentimentality has allowed this creature to grow unchecked. Danzo murmured, his voice cold as the grave. With him gone, the village will need a stronger hand. One that is not afraid to cut out a cancer before it spreads. The victory had saved Konoha. But for Naruto, it had just painted a much larger target on his back. The cage of sand had been broken, but a far more dangerous one, forged of politics and fear, was already being built around him. Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. Echoes of a Fallen Clan. Konoha mourned under a slate-gray sky. The funeral for the third Hokage was a solemn affair, a sea of black robes and quiet grief. Rain began to fall, not a cleansing downpour, but a miserable, weeping drizzle that clung to the air and chilled the bone. Naruto stood in the crowd, a face among hundreds, feeling strangely disconnected from the sorrow around him. He hadn't known the old man well, not really, but Hiruzen had been one of the few people in power whose eyes held kindness instead of suspicion when they looked at him. Now, that kindness was gone, extinguished and buried in the cold, wet earth. The village itself felt different. The victory against the sand and sound was a hollow one, paid for in blood. In the vacuum left by Hiruzen's death, a quiet, cold fear had taken root. The village council, led by the third's old teammates Homura and Kaharu, had assumed interim control. Their leadership was a thing of reaction and paranoia. Shinobi patrols were doubled, curfews were enacted, and whispers began to circulate. Whispers about the Uchiha boy who was seen fighting alongside the Sand's monster. Whispers about the unpredictable Jinchuriki who had somehow defeated it. Naruto was no longer just the village pariah. He was a strategic asset of terrifying, unknown potential. A weapon that had saved them, yes, but a weapon nonetheless. And weapons, when not in use, were to be locked away. He felt the shift in the way people looked at him. The Jonin who had once ignored him now watched with wary, analytical eyes. The civilians who had once glared with hatred now stared with a new kind of fear, the fear of a chained beast that had momentarily slipped its leash. It was Jiraiya who gave voice to the threat. He found Naruto that evening, sitting on a training post, watching the rain draw shimmering lines on the dark, polished wood of the memorial stone. The Sanin's usual boisterous persona was gone, stripped away to reveal the hardened shinobi beneath. "They're afraid of you, kid," Jiraiya said, his voice a low rumble. He wasn't looking at Naruto, but at the newly carved name of his former sensei. Hiruzen was the only thing standing between you and the more pragmatic elements of this village's leadership. Now he's gone. Naruto said nothing, just continued to watch the rain. The council is weak, easily swayed. Jiraiya continued, and Danzo is whispering in their ears. He's telling them you're a risk. A power too great to be left roaming free. He's arguing for your protective custody. The words hung in the air, cold and heavy as a prisoner's shackle. Protective custody. A clean, clinical term for a cage. So what? Naruto finally asked, his voice rough. I'm a shinobi of Konoha. They can't just lock me up. Can't they? Jiraiya turned, his gaze sharp and serious. You publicly displayed a power that nullified a rampaging Biju. You defeated a Hyuga prodigy by overpowering his clan's sacred techniques. And in the Forest of Death, you went up against Orochimaru and forced him to retreat. They don't know what you are, kid. And shinobi fear what they don't understand. Danzo understands only one thing. Power that is not under his absolute control is a threat that must be neutralized. Naruto's hands clenched. He knew the old Sannin was right. He could feel the net tightening around him with every passing day. There's another problem, Jiraiya said, his tone grim. Orochimaru. He didn't just attack the village for revenge. He came for two things. Sasuke Uchiha, and you. He'll be back, and the next time he comes for you, he won't be holding back. Konoha, in its current state, cannot protect you from him. A gust of wind sent a shower of cold rain over them. The situation was clear. He was a prisoner in waiting, a target for a monster, and his only powerful ally was now a name carved in stone. There is one way out, Jiraiya said. One person who has the power and political clout to stand against Danzo and reunite the village. My old teammate, Tsunade Senju. The world's greatest medical nin and the last of the first Hokage's line. We find her, we drag her back here, and we make her the fifth Hokage. It's the only move we have left. He looked Naruto dead in the eye. But it means getting you out of the village. Tonight, we leave, officially, on a training journey. Unofficially, we're political exiles on a desperate mission to save our home from itself. The choice was not a choice at all. A cage, or the open road. Stagnation, or a chance to find answers. When do we leave? Naruto asked. Their departure was a thing of shadows and secrets. There were no goodbyes. The rift between Naruto and his teammates was too wide to be crossed with a few simple words. To say goodbye to Sasuke would be to acknowledge the bitter envy that now defined their relationship. To say goodbye to Sakura would be to face the terror in her eyes. It was better this way. A clean break. The first few weeks on the road were a blur of dusty towns and winding roads. Jiraiya pushed Naruto hard. Their training sessions were relentless, grueling affairs. But it was different from their time in Konoha. Jiraiya's questions became more pointed. When you fought the Hyuga, he'd ask while they rested by a campfire, you predicted his movements. How? It wasn't just speed. I don't know. Naruto would answer honestly. It's like, I can feel the space around me. I knew where his hands would be before he moved them. Another time, while practicing chakra control, Jiraiya had him meditate. Focus on the Kyuubi's chakra. Feel its rage. Naruto tried, but he found something else. There's more than just the red one, he said, his eyes closed. There's another feeling. It's warm, quiet. It feels like sunshine after a long winter. Jiraiya would just nod, a thoughtful expression on his face as he scribbled notes into a small, leather-bound journal. He was not a teacher, he was an archaeologist, carefully excavating the ruins of a forgotten history buried within his student's soul. After a month of travel, as they reached the coast of the Land of Fire, Jiraiya changed their course. We're taking a detour, he announced one morning. Before we can find Tsunade, you need to understand where you come from. Not just your parents, kid. Your people. They hired a small, rickety boat and set out into the ocean, towards the swirling currents that gave the land of whirlpools its name. As they approached, a massive, unending whirlpool barred their path, a churning vortex that would tear any ship to pieces. In its center was an island, shrouded in mist. Uzushiogakure, the ancestral home of the Uzumaki clan. The village was destroyed during the Second Great War. Jiraiya explained over the roar of the water. The other nations feared their power in Fuinjutsu. They banded together to wipe them out. He looked at Naruto. The entrance is protected by a network of sealing barriers. Only someone of Uzumaki blood, carrying the clan's unique chakra signature, can pass through safely. Naruto stood at the bow of the boat, his hair whipping in the wind. He closed his eyes and reached out. Not with his senses, but with that other, deeper feeling. He could see them, not with his eyes, but in his mind. Lines of brilliant, golden energy crisscrossed the water, forming an invisible, intricate web. Some lines were dormant, others pulsed with a hungry, dangerous light, ready to shred anything that touched them. He saw a single, clear path through the maze. That way, he said, pointing. Steer left of that jagged rock, then hard to starboard. There's a channel. The old sailor looked at him like he was crazy, but Jiraiya nodded, a look of grim confirmation on his face. Do as he says. They navigated the treacherous waters, following Naruto's precise, unerring directions. The moment their boat crossed the invisible barrier, the roar of the whirlpool diminished, the water around them becoming eerily calm. They had passed through the veil. The ruins of Uzushiya were a testament to a great and sudden violence. Collapsed towers and crumbling walls were overgrown with vines. The red spiral crest of the Uzumaki clan barely visible on moss-covered stones. It was a ghost city, haunted by a powerful, lingering silence. But Naruto felt something else. A resonance. A feeling of coming home to a place he'd never known. His celestial energy, the quiet, golden half of his soul, thrummed in recognition. This was a place of his people. Jiraiya led him through the ruins. Not to the library or the clan leader's estate, but to the very center of the city, where the foundations of a massive citadel plunged deep into the earth. The heart of the clan's power wasn't in their scrolls, Jiraiya said, pushing aside a massive stone slab that revealed a dark, spiraling staircase. It was in their history. Down here, they descended into the cold, still darkness. At the bottom, they found not a vault, but a vast, circular chamber. The air was cool and pure, and there was no dust. The walls were made of a smooth, pearlescent stone that seemed to drink the light from Jiraiya's torch. As Naruto stepped into the center of the room, the walls came to life. Faint, golden lines began to trace across the stone, forming images. They were murals, carved with impossible detail, and they pulsed with a gentle, living chakra that responded to Naruto's presence. They were not just pictures, they were memories, infused into the very stone of the sanctuary. The first mural showed a being of pure light descending from a sea of stars, landing in a primitive, mortal world. It was androgynous, beautiful, and carried an aura of profound order. The second showed the being creating a lineage. It mingled its essence with that of the first humans of this land, creating a new clan. The Uzumaki. They were not warriors, but wardens, their purpose to maintain the fragile balance between the mortal plane and the realms beyond. The mural depicted them creating powerful fuinjutsu, not as weapons, but as a language to speak with the spirits of the world, to soothe them, to bind them, to keep order. The third mural was dark and violent. It showed a creature of the abyss, a being of pure chaos and unthinking rage, clawing its way into the world. It was a colossal fox with 9 tails, but it was more primal. More elemental than the Biju Naruto knew. It was a force of nature, an embodiment of destruction. The celestial ancestor and the first Uzumaki rose to fight it, not killing it, but sealing its physical form deep within the earth. The fourth mural showed the aftermath. The creature's body was sealed, but its essence, its furious, chaotic will, remained a poison in the world, a constant threat. The mural depicted the Uzumaki dedicating themselves to containing this influence for generations. The final mural was a prophecy. It showed the image of a woman with the vibrant red hair of the Uzumaki, Kushina. It showed a man with hair like the sun, Minato. And it showed their child. The image of the child was a silhouette, but from its back sprouted 2 wings. One identical to the wing of Shadow Naruto had manifested in the forest, and another made of pure, golden light. Below the image, the carvings depicted a world tearing itself apart, and the winged figure standing at the center of the cataclysm. Naruto reached out, his fingers tracing the outline of the winged child. As he touched the stone, a wave of pure understanding, of empathic knowledge, flowed into him from the mural. He saw it, the truth. The 9 tails was not a separate entity. It was the legacy of the abyssal creature, a fragment of its chaos passed down through generations. Kushina had not just been its container. She had been its warden. And when she conceived a child with Minato, the celestial blood of the Uzumaki and the abyssal taint of the fox had met in her womb. His father, Minato Namikaze, had not performed a simple sealing on the night of his birth. Faced with an impossible choice, the 4th Hokage had enacted the most powerful and forbidden fuinjutsu of the Uzumaki clan. He hadn't sealed a demon into his son. He had taken the 2 warring halves of his son's soul, the celestial heritage of his mother and the abyssal echo of the fox, and he had fused them together into a single, balanced being. He had created the perfect union. He had created a Nephilim. The Kyuubi. It's me, Naruto whispered, his voice trembling. He wasn't a jailer. He was the prisoner and the prison, all in one. The fox's rage was his rage. Its loneliness was his loneliness. Jiraiya placed a heavy hand on his shoulder. Your father didn't curse you, Naruto. He believed you were the one foretold. The one who could finally create a new balance. He entrusted the future of the world to you. They stood in the silent, glowing chamber for a long time. The weight of his heritage, the truth of his own soul, settled over Naruto. It was not a burden. It was an answer, an explanation for the warring feelings inside him, for the strange powers he possessed. He was not a monster. He was a paradox. They left the ruins of Uzushio the next day, the secrets of the past now illuminating their path to the future. That night, Jiraiya brought out a water balloon. The Rasengan, the Sannin said, his voice back to its usual teacher-like tone. It's the pinnacle of shape manipulation. The goal is to rotate your chakra at high speed and contain it in the shape of a sphere. No hand signs. Pure control. Naruto took the balloon. He closed his eyes, but this time, he wasn't just reaching for his chakra. He was reaching for the two fundamental forces of his soul. He drew on the calm, creative warmth of his celestial side. He drew on the wild, destructive fury of his abyssal side. He didn't try to suppress one or favor the other. He let them flow into his palm, coaxing them to meet, to swirl, to find a balance. It was the hardest thing he had ever done. The energies fought, one trying to create, the other to annihilate. His hand grew hot, then cold. The balloon expanded and contracted erratically. But slowly, painstakingly, he found the center, the point of perfect equilibrium. The balloon popped with a wet splash. In his palm, for a single, breathtaking second, a small, unstable sphere of pure energy spun. It was a swirling vortex of violent power, but it was contained. And within its transparent shell, tiny sparks of golden light and black shadow chased each other in a chaotic, beautiful dance. He looked at the nascent Rasengan, then at Jiraiya, a slow, determined smile spreading across his face. He was finally learning his own language. Chapter 4 End. Chapter 5. The Valley of Two Souls. Tanzaku Town was a den of indulgence and despair, a place where fortunes were won and lost on the roll of a die. Its streets teemed with gamblers, drunkards, and shinobi on their days off, all seeking a fleeting escape. It was the last place one would expect to find a figure of legend, which was exactly why Tsunade Senju was there. Jiraiya and Naruto found her in the town's largest gambling parlor. She was a woman who seemed to defy age, her features sharp and her presence commanding, even as she slammed a sake cup down on the table and cursed her luck. The meeting was not a warm reunion of old comrades. It was a tense negotiation, thick with the ghosts of the past. Before Jiraiya could even make his plea for her to become Hokage, the doors slid open. Orochimaru, his face pale and his arms hanging limp and useless at his sides, entered with his ever-present subordinate, Kabuto Yakushi. His proposal was a venomous whisper, a deal with the devil. He would resurrect Tsunade's long-dead brother and lover using his forbidden jutsu, and in exchange, she would heal his arms. The tension in the room became a physical force. The three Sannin, a fractured trinity of power, stood on a knife's edge. Tsunade, torn between her grief and her duty, asked for a week to consider. Naruto didn't trust it for a second. He watched her, saw the pain in her eyes, and knew that the temptation of seeing her loved ones again was a powerful lure. He said as much to Jiraiya, who, blinded by his history with his teammate, waved off the concern. It was a mistake. Tsunade met with them later, her drink laced with a potent paralytic. Jiraiya, caught off guard by the betrayal, collapsed, his chakra network seized. On the outskirts of the town, in an open field, Tsunade met Orochimaru. But it was a trap of her own. She had never intended to heal him. She came to kill him. But she had underestimated him. Even without the use of his arms, Orochimaru was still a Sannin. The battle was a brutal display of taijutsu and summoning, with giant slugs and snakes clashing in the ruined field. Naruto arrived to find Jiraiya still paralyzed and Tsunade outmatched. He burst onto the scene, not with a grand entrance, but with a determined grit that surprised them all. "I'm not letting you lay another hand on them," he yelled, pointing at Orochimaru. Kabuto stepped in his way, his glasses glinting. "You really are a persistent little gnat." His expression was one of mild annoyance, the look of a scientist about to dissect a bothersome insect. "Your healing factor is remarkable, but every system has its limits. He lunged, his hands glowing with the pale green chakra of a medical nin. They weren't healing hands. They were scalpels. He was too fast, too precise. He darted past Naruto's guard and slashed his hand across Naruto's leg. Naruto stumbled, a searing pain shooting up his thigh. His muscles refused to respond. I've just severed the quadriceps femoris muscle group, Kabuto explained with clinical detachment. Normally, it would take months of physical therapy to recover. Even with the Kyuubi's power, it will take at least a few minutes for that level of cellular damage to regenerate. By which time, you will be dead. He moved in for the finishing blow, but Naruto just grit his teeth, his eyes squeezed shut in concentration. He didn't reach for the furious red chakra he knew so well. He reached for the other half. The quiet, warm, celestial power. A faint, golden light enveloped his leg. Kabuto watched, his eyes widening in disbelief. Beneath the skin, he could say, the severed muscle tissue knitting back together at a visible, impossible rate. It wasn't the chaotic, explosive regeneration of the Kyuubi. It was a precise, orderly reconstruction, as if a master weaver were rethreading the very fabric of his body. In less than 3 seconds, Naruto stood up, his leg completely healed. How? Kabuto breathed, his scientific composure cracking. That's not regeneration. That's creation. You know a lot about how bodies work, Naruto said, his voice low and serious. But you don't know a thing about mine. He charged forward, his right hand outstretched. A swirling sphere of chaotic energy spun to life in his palm, sparks of gold and black crackling within it. The unstable Rasengan. Kabuto, seeing the danger, met the attack with his own chakra-infused strike, aiming to disrupt Naruto's heart. But Naruto took the blow, the chakra scalpel slicing deep into his shoulder, and drove the Rasengan into Kabuto's stomach. The impact was devastating. Kabuto was sent flying, but the damage was more than just kinetic. The dual energies of the Rasengan, creation and destruction, wreaked havoc on his chakra network. The golden energy hyper-stimulated his cells while the black, abyssal energy simultaneously tried to annihilate them. His entire system was thrown into chaos, effectively frying his pathways from the inside out. He crashed to the ground, twitching and spasming, completely out of the fight. Tsunade stared, dumbfounded. The boy had mastered the fourth jutsu. He had healed an injury she knew to be crippling. And he had done it all while protecting her. Her bet, her cynicism, her grief, it all shattered in that moment. She saw the ghost of her brother, Nawaki, and her lover, Dan, in Naruto's unbreakable will. She was the one who had given up. He was the one who was still fighting. With her resolve restored, she joined the fray. The Battle of the Sannin reached its climax. Orochimaru was eventually forced to retreat, vowing that he would get what he came for. One way or another. As the dust settled, Tsunade looked at Naruto, who was bleeding and battered but still standing. She took the first Hokage's necklace from her neck and placed it around his. "I'll take the bet," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I will be the 5th Hokage." The journey back to Konoha was faster, charged with a new sense of purpose. But their victory was short-lived. A messenger toad intercepted them halfway, bearing a scroll with an urgent, dire message. Uchiha Itachi had been sighted in Konoha. He and his Akatsuki partner had a brief, devastating confrontation with Kakashi, Asuma, and Kurenai. And then, he had found Sasuke. The details were sparse, but the result was clear. Sasuke had been utterly broken, physically and psychologically, by his older brother. The chasm in power he had perceived was an uncrossable, infinite abyss. Desperate, consumed by his own weakness, Sasuke Uchiha had abandoned the village. He had left with the Sound 4, Orochimaru's elite guard, seeking the power his rival offered. The moment they returned, Tsunade asserted her new authority. "Shikamaru Nara," she barked, her voice echoing through the emergency council meeting. "You are a Chunin with the sharpest strategic mind in this village. Assemble a team. Your mission is to retrieve Sasuke Uchiha. Use of force is authorized, but bring him back alive." Naruto, his wounds still fresh, stepped forward. "Let me go. You are in no condition to fight," Tsunade said sternly. "I don't care," Naruto replied, his blue eyes blazing with a cold fire. "This is my fight. He was my teammate." He didn't wait for permission. As Shikamaru's newly formed squad, Neji, Choji, Kiba, and Shikamaru himself, leapt from the village gates, Naruto was a shadow trailing behind them. His own one-man pursuit already underway. He caught up to them at the Valley of the End. The evidence of a series of brutal battles littered the landscape. His friends had fought hard, and bought him the time he needed. At the base of the two colossal statues of Hashirama Senju and Madara Uchiha, Sasuke stood waiting, his back to him. The air was heavy with the coming storm. "You came," Sasuke said, without turning. Black, flame-like marks, the first stage of the curse mark, covered the left side of his body. "I knew you would, Dobi. Let's go home, Sasuke," Naruto said, his voice devoid of its usual warmth. Sasuke turned, a cruel, pitying smirk on his face. "Home, to a village that makes you weak. To a team that holds you back. You don't get it, do you? Bonds like ours, they're just weights. Itachi proved that to me. To get power, true power, you have to sever them all. You have to be alone. You're an idiot," Naruto stated flatly. "You think being alone makes you strong. I've been alone my entire life. It's not strength. It's just empty. Those bonds you want to sever are the only reason I'm still standing. They're the source of my power, not a weight. It's for them that I fight. Then you will die protecting them." Sasuke shrieked, and he charged, a Chidori crackling in his hand. The battle that followed was a cataclysm. It was a clash of lightning and wind, fire and shadow. Sasuke's Sharingan could predict Naruto's every move, but Naruto's raw power and unnatural resilience allowed him to endure, to keep pressing forward. The fight escalated, their jutsus tearing the valley apart, ripping chunks from the stone statues of their predecessors. Finally, pushed to his limit, Sasuke cried out in a mix of agony and ecstasy. The curse mark spread, his skin turning a sickly gray, his hair growing long and wild. Two grotesque, hand-like wings tore themselves from his back. It was a monstrous, artificial power. A cheap imitation of the truth. "This is the power I was promised. Naruto," he roared, his voice distorted. "The power to kill Itachi. What do you have to match this?" Naruto stood on the water, his expression somber. "I didn't want to do this, Sasuke." He closed his eyes. He didn't draw on rage. He reached inward and accepted the two halves of his soul, bringing them into perfect, terrible harmony. An eruption of power, silent and absolute, washed over the valley. When Naruto opened his eyes, they were mismatched, one gold, one crimson. From his back, two wings unfurled. One was a wing of pure, incandescent golden light, radiating a warmth that made the very air sing. The other was a wing of absolute darkness, a void that seemed to drink the light around it, crackling with abyssal energy. He was a perfect symmetry of creation and destruction. The power rolling off him was not the tainted, corrupting energy of Sasuke's seal, it was a primordial force, ancient and overwhelming. Sasuke stared, his cursed form seeming small and pathetic in comparison. The awe, the fear, the searing envy, it all boiled over into a final, desperate scream of rage. He gathered all of his dark chakra into one hand, forming a jet-black Chidori. Naruto raised his own hand, a Rasengan forming in his palm. It was no longer unstable. It was a perfect sphere, swirling with the balanced, warring energies of light and shadow. They charged, meeting in the center of the waterfall. Chidori, Rasengan. The explosion was not a sound. It was a void. A sphere of black and white energy expanded, vaporizing the water, shattering the stone, and engulfing them both in its silent, absolute power. When the light faded, Naruto was standing. His wings were gone, his eyes were blue again, and blood streamed from a dozen wounds. Sasuke lay unconscious at his feet. The curse mark receded, leaving him broken and human. Naruto had won. He knelt, looking at the face of the boy who had been his first friend, his brother in all but blood. He could take him back. He could fulfill the mission. But he saw the future. Sasuke, imprisoned, his hatred festering until it consumed him, becoming the perfect, willing vessel for Orochimaru. He made a choice, not as a Konoha shinobi, but as Naruto. With a heavy heart and a surgeon's precision, he reached down. There were two sharp, clean snaps. Then two more. He broke Sasuke's arms and legs. It was a brutal, terrible act. A shinobi's act, meant to incapacitate, to render a target useless. Orochimaru couldn't use a broken vessel. It would buy Sasuke time. Time to heal. Time to think. Time, hopefully, to choose a different path. Kakashi arrived moments later, his one eye taking in the devastating scene, the shattered valley, the unconscious Uchiha, and his other student, standing over him with an expression of profound loss. Naruto didn't wait for the questions. He didn't try to explain the impossible choice he had made. He just turned and began to walk away, his back to his team, his village, and his only friend. He had saved Sasuke's future, but in doing so, he had accepted his own solitude. The weight of that choice was a heavier burden than any power he possessed. Chapter 5 End. Chapter 6. The Purifier's Gambit. Naruto walked through the gates of Konoha alone, just as the sun was beginning to set. He didn't come back with the retrieval squad, whose members were being carried into the hospital on stretchers. Their bodies broken but their spirits defiant. He arrived hours after Kakashi had carried Sasuke through the same gates, a silent, grim procession that had sent a shockwave of dismay through the village. He was met at the gate by two Anbu, their animal masks betraying no emotion. They didn't ask questions. They simply escorted him, a silent honor guard for a pariah, directly to the Hokage Tower. The walk through the village was a gauntlet of stairs. There was no cheering, no relief. There was only confusion, fear, and a rising tide of angry whispers. He was the monster who had crippled their last Uchiha. In Tsunade's office, the air was thick with a tension that could have been cut with a kunai. Jiraiya stood by the window, his arms crossed, his face a mask of thunderous rage. Shizune was pale, her hands trembling slightly, and Tsunade, the fifth Hokage, sat behind her desk, her expression a mixture of fury and a deep, weary sorrow. "Report," she commanded, her voice dangerously quiet. Naruto stood before the desk, his clothes torn, his body bruised, but his back straight. He didn't fidget or make excuses. The boy who had left the village was gone. One who returned was a soldier reporting the outcome of a bitter war. The mission to retrieve Sasuke Uchiha was a failure, he stated, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. He refused to return. He chose to seek power from Orochimaru. And what you did to him? Tsunade's voice was sharp. Kakashi's report says his arms and legs were shattered. Not the work of a stray jutsu. It was deliberate, clinical. Sasuke's new power is a curse mark. A gift from Orochimaru. It grants him strength by corrupting his body and mind, Naruto explained, his blue eyes as cold and clear as ice. Orochimaru wants him as a vessel. A broken vessel is useless. I did not cripple a Konoha shinobi. I sabotaged an enemy's weapon. The logic was brutal, cold, and flawless. It was the logic of a shinobi who had made a hard choice in the field, prioritizing the long-term strategic goal over the immediate mission objective. It was the kind of logic that would have made the third Hokage weep and Danzo Shimura applaud. Tsunade slammed her fist on the desk, the wood cracking under the force of the blow. You defied my orders. You pursued him alone. You engaged a comrade and nearly killed him. You were a genin W. Ho took it upon himself to make a decision that will have repercussions for this entire nation. He made his choice, Naruto replied, his calm unshaken. I made mine. Before Tsunade could unleash the full force of her fury, the door opened. Homura and Kaharu, the village elders, entered, their faces grim masks of disapproval. And behind them, walking with a quiet confidence that filled the room with a sudden chill, was Danzo Shimura. Lady Tsunade, Kaharu said, her voice like cracking parchment. The council has been convened. We have reviewed the reports. A decision has been made concerning the Jinchuriki. Tsunade's eyes narrowed. This is my decision to make. It has become a matter of village security, Homura stated, and thus, it is a matter for the entire council. Your personal feelings for the boy are clouding your judgment. Danzo stepped forward, his one visible eye sweeping over Naruto with a dispassionate, predatory gaze. The evidence is overwhelming, he said, his voice a dry rustle. The subject, Naruto Uzumaki, has proven to be an unstable and unpredictable asset. In the land of waves, he exhibited an anomalous power that terrified even a demon like Zabuza Momochi. During the Chunin exams, he manifested a monstrous, winged form. He defeated a rampaging Biju with a technique that no one can explain. And now, He has destroyed a historical landmark and brutally crippled his own teammate. The last loyal Uchiha, he laid out the facts like a prosecutor building an airtight case, twisting every heroic act into a sign of terrifying instability. He is a loyal shinobi of Konoha. Jiraiya snarled, stepping away from the window. Every one of those actions was to protect this village. Loyalty without control is a liability, not an asset, Danzo countered smoothly. The subject possesses power designated as Class 10, a threat level reserved for entities that could destroy this village from within. Hiruzen's sentimentality allowed this power to grow unchecked. We cannot afford to make the same mistake. The council has voted. A full consensus, save for the Hokage's seat. Tsunade stood up, her killing intent flooding the room. If you think I will allow you to execute a child who has saved this village time and again. Execution is a waste of a valuable resource, Danzo interrupted, unfazed. The council's decision is not termination. It is containment. The subject is to be transferred to my authority. He will be placed in the care of Root for re-education and conditioning. His power will be studied, controlled, and honed into a perfect, loyal weapon for Konoha. A tool that will not act on sentiment or personal whim. It is the only logical solution. The room fell silent. It was a brilliant political move. He had framed the ultimate betrayal as a pragmatic compromise. He wasn't killing the hero, he was securing him. Tsunade looked from Danzo's implacable face to Naruto's. She saw the trap closing. If she refused, Danzo would paint her as a sentimental fool. Unfit to lead in wartime. The council would be thrown into chaos. Her nascent reign as Hokage would be over before it began, and in the ensuing power vacuum, Danzo would get his hands on Naruto anyway. Her only option was to play the long game. To agree, and in doing so, buy time. To keep Naruto alive, even if it meant putting him in a cage. It was the hardest decision of her life. Fine, she bit out. The word tasting like poison. She couldn't look at Naruto. She couldn't bear to see the betrayal in his eyes. But there was no betrayal. There was only a quiet, cold resignation. Naruto had known, from the moment Danzo walked into the room, how this would end. The village he had sworn to protect was not a home. It was a weapon forge, and he was the raw material. 2 meters. Asked Root agents stepped forward from the shadows. They moved with a liquid silence, their chakra signatures almost completely suppressed. One of them held up a metal collar with intricate seals carved into its surface. This is not necessary, Jiraiya growled, stepping between them and Naruto. It is a chakra suppressant seal, Danzo stated. A precaution. Naruto looked at Jiraiya. It's all right, pervy sage. He then looked at the collar, and at the faceless Anbu holding it. He didn't fight. He didn't argue. He simply stood still, offering no resistance as the cold metal was clamped around his neck. There was a faint click, and a wave of weakness washed over him. The vibrant, dual energies within him felt suddenly muffled, distant, like a fire smothered under a wet blanket. They took his forehead protector, the metal plate with the leaf symbol seeming like a cruel joke. Then, they led him from the room. He didn't look back. The news spread through the village not as a public decree, but as a chilling rumor. The Konoha 11, recovering in the hospital from their desperate battle, heard it first. Kiba raged, Choji was stunned into silence, and Shikamaru, his mind piecing together the political chess game, felt a wave of cold disgust. What a drag, he muttered, but his voice was filled with a rare, burning anger. They had all put their lives on the line, and this was how the village repaid their leader. In the Hyuga compound, Neji was told of the council's decision. He stood in the dojo, his hands wrapped, his mind replaying his defeat. Naruto had broken his philosophy of fate. He was an aberration, a living paradox, but he had fought with conviction. This, containment, it felt dishonorable. It was the act of cowards, caging something they could not understand. Hinata watched from her window as Naruto was led away by the masked agents. Her Byakugan saw more than the others. She saw the brilliant, beautiful light of his celestial half being choked and smothered by the seal around his neck. Tears streamed down her face, silent and hot. The village had just imprisoned its own heart. The Root headquarters was a sterile labyrinth deep beneath the village, a place of no sound, no light, no emotion. Naruto was led through white, featureless corridors that all looked the same. It was a place designed to erase identity. They stopped before a heavy, windowless door. An agent opened it, revealing a small, white cell. There was a bed slab, a toilet, and nothing else. The walls seemed to hum with suppressing seals. "Welcome home, Nine Tails," the agent said, his voice a dead monotone. He shoved Naruto inside. The door slammed shut, the sound of the heavy lock echoing in the profound silence. It was a sound of absolute finality. Naruto stood in the center of the cell, the only spot of color in the stark, white world. In a darkened observation room on the other side of a one-way mirror, Danzo Shimura watched his prize. The Nephilim was caged. The village was secure. The weapon was his. "Begin phase 1, he ordered to an aide. "Psychological conditioning. Break his will. We will strip away the boy, and forge a tool in his place." His gambit had paid off perfectly. But as he watched the boy in the cell, who simply sat down on the bed, his expression unreadable, Danzo felt the faintest flicker of unease. He had caged the storm. Now, he had to see if he could truly tame it. Chapter 6 End. Chapter 7. The Unseen Enemy. The world inside the white cell was measured in meals. 3 times a day, a slot in the heavy door would open and a tray with a tasteless, nutrient-rich paste would slide through. That was the only clock Naruto had. There were no windows, no sounds from the outside, only the constant, oppressive hum of the seals that lined the walls. And the ever-present weight of the collar on his neck. This was not a prison for the body. It was a crucible for the mind. Danzo's conditioning was a thing of insidious patience. It was not physical torture. There were no beatings, no starvation. The torture was far more subtle. Long periods of absolute sensory deprivation in the silent, white room would be shattered by sudden, violent flashes of genjutsu. He was forced to relive his failures, each one twisted into a damning indictment of his weakness. He saw Sasuke walking away, his expression a mask of pity. He saw Sakura screaming in terror at the sight of his shadowy wing. He saw the faces of the villagers, their hatred and fear magnified 1,000 times, their voices whispering a single, damning word: monster. They were trying to break him down, to hollow him out. To make him accept their version of the truth, that he was nothing more than a weapon, a thing of rage and destruction, and that his only value lay in being aimed and fired by a worthy master. Danzo himself would conduct the interrogations. He would sit across from Naruto in a sterile white room, his face impassive, his one eye searching for a crack in Naruto's resolve. "You feel it, don't you?" Danzo's voice was a dry rasp. "The monster inside, the thing that made your friends fear you, the thing that made the Uchiha boy flee. It is your only true nature. I am not trying to destroy you. I am trying to help you embrace it, to purify you of the useless, sentimental shell called Naruto Uzumaki." But they had made a fundamental miscalculation. They believed Hi's strength came from the outside world, from his bonds, his dreams of being Hokage, his desperate need for acknowledgement. They were trying to erase a boy they no longer understood. In the crushing silence of his cell, stripped of all external distractions, Naruto turned inward. He couldn't draw on his chakra in any meaningful way, the collar and the seals saw to that. But they couldn't sever the link to his own soul. He began to meditate, not to find peace, but to explore the vast, internal landscape he had only just discovered in Uzushio. He found the two halves of his being, the celestial and the abyssal, muted but present. The collar was a dam, but it couldn't stop the river. He focused on the nexus point between them, the place of perfect, silent balance. He learned to hold that balance, to find his center in the void they had created for him. The genjutsu visions of hatred and fear began to lose their power, crashing harmlessly against the profound, internal stillness he was cultivating. Their attempts to break him were forging him into something sharper, harder, and more self-aware than he had ever been. He was a prisoner, yes, but his mind was freer than ever before. On the surface, Konoha continued on, wounded but functioning, but beneath the veneer of normalcy, a quiet rebellion was taking root. Shikamaru Nara, burdened by a sense of responsibility that felt heavier than any mission scroll, had become the unlikely hub of a conspiracy. A direct assault is idiotic, he'd explained to the others in a secret meeting in the Nara clan's forest. Root's headquarters is a fortress. And even if we got in, We'd be branded traitors and hunted down. The whole operation would be a failure. Troublesome. His plan was one of infiltration, not invasion. For weeks, they gathered intelligence. Kiba and Akamaru, under the guise of training, mapped the labyrinthine network of old tunnels that ran beneath the village. Shino's Kikaichu, small enough to be unnoticed, became a network of silent spies. Crawling through ventilation shafts and listening for whispers. Hinata and Neji provided the most crucial intelligence. From the surface, they used their Byakugan to scan deep into the earth. Mapping the layout of the root complex, noting guard patrols, and identifying the chakra signatures of the seals that powered the base. It was a slow, painstaking process. Kakashi and Jiraiya provided oversight and support, feeding them information about Danzo's political movements and preparing a safe house for the eventual escape. But they allowed Shikamaru to lead. This was not their fight to command. This was the new generation drawing a line in the sand, refusing to accept the cold, pragmatic cruelty of the old. The trigger came from one of Shino's insects. It had found IT's way into Danzo's private study and had overheard a conversation that made the Abarame's blood run cold. The subject's mental resistance is unexpectedly high, Danzo had stated to one of his scientists. Phase 1 has failed. We will proceed directly to Phase 3. Prepare the Fuinjutsu apparatus for soul imprinting. If we cannot convince the boy to become a tool, we will override his consciousness and force the issue. The procedure is scheduled for the night of the new moon. In 3 days. The message was clear. They were out of time. Danzo was done playing games. He was going to murder Naruto Uzumaki and leave his body as a puppet. The night of the new moon was starless and suffocatingly dark. The escape began not with a bang, but with a series of quiet, perfectly coordinated whispers. Miles away from the root complex, near the village's western wall, an explosion of scent erupted as Kiba and Akamaru detonated a series of highly concentrated beast scent bombs. The Inuzuka track, Nins on patrol were thrown into chaos, their sensitive noses overwhelmed. It was a minor but effective diversion, drawing several route patrols away from the central base to investigate. Deep underground, Shikamaru lay flat on his stomach in a dusty maintenance tunnel, his eye pressed to a ventilation grate. He could see the main surveillance chamber below. He wove a hand sign, and his shadow stretched, thin as a razor's edge. Slipping through the grate, it slithered across the floor, silent and unseen, and touched the console that monitored the base's security seals. With a flicker of chakra, he overloaded the system, causing a momentary, system-wide reboot. For 60 seconds, most of the internal alarms were down. Hinata, now, he whispered into a small, short-range radio. Miles away, atop the Hokage monument, Hinata stood beside Neji. He's in the lowest level, Sector Delta. The corridor is clear, but the seals on his cell are powered by a separate conduit. You'll have to disable it manually. It's behind a panel to the left of the door. Understood, Neji said, and he was gone, a blur of motion as he entered a hidden access tunnel they had discovered. Guided by Hinata's voice in his ear, Neji navigated the sterile white maze. He moved with the deadly grace of a true prodigy, disabling the few remaining guards with precise, non-lethal strikes from his gentle fist. He reached the cell block. It was silent and cold. The panel is there, Hinata's voice directed. Neji placed his palm on the wall. Byakugan. His vision pierced the metal. He saw the flow of chakra, the intricate lines of the conduit. He didn't need to smash it. With 2 fingers, he delivered a sharp, precise jab. Gentle fist. The chakra burst was tiny, but perfectly placed. The conduit severed. The oppressive hum from Naruto's cell door died. With another precise strike, he broke the internal locking mechanism. The heavy door swung open. Naruto sat on the edge of his bed slab. He was thinner, paler. But his eyes were shockingly clear. There was no sign of the broken boy they had tried to create. He looked at Neji, a faint, tired smile on his lips. "Took you guys long enough," he said. Neji helped him up, feeling a surge of relief. "Can you run? Let's find out." They were halfway down the corridor when their path was blocked. It wasn't a squad of Root Anbu. It was a single figure, standing in the middle of the hallway. Seemingly having appeared from nowhere. It was man-sized, but distinctly not human. Its body was composed of shifting, crystalline planes that caught the light at odd angles. as if it were a poorly rendered geometric model. It had no face, no eyes, no mouth. It simply existed, radiating an aura of such profound, chilling order that it made the sterile halls of Root feel warm and alive by comparison. In his observation chamber, Danzo watched the monitor, his one eye wide with a look of rapturous awe. "It's here," he breathed. Just as the archives predicted. A true arbiter. Neji immediately fell into the gentle fist stance. "Get behind me, Naruto." He shot forward, his movements a blur, aiming a strike at what he presumed was the creature's center of mass. His hand passed straight through it, meeting no resistance, as if the creature were a hologram. But it wasn't. The chilling aura of its presence was real. The arbiter did not react. It simply raised an arm. The section of the wall beside Neji dissolved, not crumbling or exploding, but simply ceasing to exist, leaving a perfectly smooth, cauterized hole that led into the raw earth beyond. Neji backed away, his composure shaken. "What is this thing? Genjutsu?" "No," Naruto said, his eyes wide. He could feel it, a being of pure law. A walking, sentient piece of reality's source code. "It's not from here." The arbiter moved, its feet not touching the ground. It glided towards them. Neji tried to attack again, this time with a full-body assault, but his strikes were useless. The creature seemed to exist on a slightly different plane of reality. It raised its other arm, and the air around Neji seemed to fold in on itself. He was trapped, suspended in a pocket of distorted space, his body frozen. His face a mask of straining effort. Naruto was alone. His friends, his village's fighting styles, his entire world's understanding of combat, it was all useless here. The chakra-suppressing collar felt like a lead weight. But Neji was dying, his body being slowly crushed by warped physics. He had to make a choice. He closed his eyes, ignoring the creature in front of him. He ignored the muffled feeling of his chakra. He reached deeper, past the dam of the seal, to the raw, primal source of his own soul. He found the abyssal half, the sleeping chaos, and he didn't just ask for its power. He unleashed it. A wave of palpable, pure anti-energy erupted from him. It was not chakra. It was a feeling of utter wrongness. It was the scream of a rule being broken. The perfect white walls of the corridor flickered, stained for a moment by a formless, violet-black chaos. The arbiter stopped. The wave of abyssal energy washed over it, and for the first time, the creature reacted. It didn't recoil in pain. Its crystalline form flickered and distorted, its perfect geometry momentarily corrupted by the raw concept of disorder. It was like pouring static into a perfect equation. This chaotic energy was anathema to its very being. It saw Naruto not as a physical threat, but as a cosmic blasphemy, a walking contradiction that defied the fundamental laws of existence. The pocket of distorted space around Neji wavered. That was the only opening Naruto would get. He lunged forward, grabbing Neji's arm and pulling him free. "Go, now," he yelled. He didn't wait to see what the creature would do. He half-dragged the disoriented Neji down the corridor, fleeing as fast as his weakened body could carry him. The arbiter did not pursue. Its form stabilized, and it simply watched them go, tilting its featureless head. Its mission had been to observe the anomaly. The anomaly had proven to be far more volatile than anticipated. A new directive was already being calculated. It vanished, leaving the empty hallway behind. Naruto and Neji burst out of a storm drain into the cool night air of the Nara forest, where the rest of the team was waiting. They were free. They were traitors. And they were alive. Jiraiya and Kakashi were there. As Naruto, panting, explained what he had seen, what he had fought, Jiraiya's face grew pale. He looked at Kakashi, a terrible understanding passing between them. "An arbiter," Jiraiya murmured, his voice grim. "I've only read the name in scrolls that Hiruzen-sensei kept locked away. They're not shinobi. They're not even from our world in the way we understand it. They are agents of a higher order. Beings who enforce the fundamental separation of the planes, mortal, celestial, abyssal." He looked at Naruto, his expression heavy with a terrifying revelation. "Your existence, Naruto, a perfect fusion of all three, is a violation of their most sacred law. Danzo didn't just put you in a cage. He lit a beacon for the gods. And that thing you fought, it was just a scout. They know you're here, and they will come to purify this world of the contradiction you represent." Our enemy isn't just Danzo anymore. It's the gatekeepers of reality itself. Chapter 7 End. The saga of the outcast continues. Chapter 8. The gathering of monsters. The safe house was a cramped, forgotten hunter's cabin deep within the Nara clan's private forest. For 3 days, it was the most wanted location in the Land of Fire. Naruto and the friends who had freed him were now designated traitors, rogue shinobi with a generous bounty placed on their heads by the new Hokage. The news, delivered by a grim-faced Shikaku Nara, was a bitter pill to swallow. Tsunade had no choice, Shikaku explained, his shadow stretching long in the lamplight. Danzo forced her hand. Publicly, you are enemies of the state. It appeases the council and gives Danzo the illusion of victory. But the bounty is for capture, not death. It's a political shield. She's giving you a reason to be on the run. A cover for whatever it is you need to do. Shikamaru slumped against the wall. So were criminals to protect the village from its own leaders. What a drag. The betrayal, necessary as it may have been, still stung. They were a handful of teenagers and 2 seasoned jonin against the entire shinobi world. We can't stay together, Kakashi said, his single eye scanning a map. A group this size is a target. We need to split up. The plan was formed out of desperation and strategic necessity. Shikamaru and the others would return to the village. They would claim they had been deceived by Jiraiya and had come to their senses, reluctantly fighting Naruto before he escaped. It was a flimsy story, but with their clan heads backing them, it would hold. They would become the eyes and ears inside Konoha, a network of spies in their own home. Neji was the last to agree. He looked at Naruto, his Byakugan seeing the faint, residual traces of the otherworldly energy he'd witnessed. What I saw in that tunnel, it was not of this world. The village is blind to the real threat. I will do what I can from the inside. With quiet, somber goodbyes, the group disbanded. Naruto was left with Jiraiya and Kakashi, a trio of fugitives with the weight of an unseen war on their shoulders. So, what's the plan? Naruto asked, looking at his 2 mentors. We run. We hide until this blows over. Running is a fool's game, Jiraiya said, his expression harder than Naruto had ever seen it. The arbiters won't stop. The Akatsuki won't stop. And Danzo won't stop. We can't hide. We have to build an army. He unrolled a larger map, one showing all the elemental nations. The arbiters see your existence as a cosmic sin, a being of human, celestial, and abyssal nature. They want to sterilize the world of such contradictions. If that's the case, who else in this world would they consider an abomination? The answer was immediate and obvious. The other Jinchuriki, Naruto breathed. Exactly, Kakashi affirmed. They are the only other people who are a fusion of human and something else. Their Biju are raw, chaotic forces of nature. They are the antithesis of the cold, sterile order the arbiters represent. They are our only potential allies. The mission was no longer about survival. It was about recruitment. It was a race to gather the world's monsters before either the Akatsuki or the arbiters could claim them. Their first destination was the most difficult and the most important, Sunagakur. Gaara of the Sand. Getting into the hidden sand was like trying to walk through a razor's edge. They were wanted Konoha shinobi. Naruto's face was on bounty posters. They traveled for weeks, moving at night, using Jiraiya's spy network to stay one step ahead of the hunter nin squads that were already sniffing at their trail. They finally reached the towering cliffs of Suna under the cover of a sandstorm. Naruto, his senses sharper than ever, found an unguarded passage into the village, a relic of a bygone era. They slipped in, cloaked and hooded, ghosts in a village of stone and wind. Their meeting with Gaara took place in the deepest chamber of the Cage Tower, a place shielded from all forms of eavesdropping. Gaara had changed. The madness in his eyes had been replaced by a quiet, heavy intensity. He was not yet the Cage, but he carried himself with the weight of his future office. His siblings, Temari and Kankuro, stood beside him, their expressions wary. Naruto didn't waste time with pleasantries or appeals to their brief, violent friendship. I fought a creature in Konoha, Naruto began. His voice low and direct. It wasn't a shinobi. It had no chakra signature as we know it. It was immune to ninjutsu and taijutsu. It didn't fight. It simply, unmade things. It came for me, because of what I am. Gaara's seafoam green eyes narrowed. And what is that? Something more than a Jinchuriki, Naruto replied. He closed his eyes, reaching inward and allowing a flicker of his balanced power to manifest. A faint golden light shimmered around his right hand, a wisp of shadow around his left. It called my existence a contradiction. It wants to enforce a universal order. And it will see any being like us, a fusion of human and something more, as a flaw to be erased. The Sand siblings looked unconvinced. It sounded like the ravings of a desperate fugitive. Naruto ignored them, his focus entirely on Gaara. Don't listen to me, listen to him. He reached out, not with his hand, but with his consciousness. He dove past Gaara's mental defenses and spoke directly to the ancient being sleeping within him. Shukaku. A deep, gravelly voice, ancient and full of spite, echoed in the shared mindscape. You, the brat with the light show. What do you want? There is a new player, Naruto projected, showing the demon the memory of the Arbiter, the feeling of its sterile, anti-chakra presence. A power of absolute, unchanging order. A power that would see a being of pure chaos like you as a disease to be cured. They won't seal you. They will unmake you. The Biju's usual manic rage was replaced by a sudden, cold fury. It felt the truth of Naruto's words, the existential threat the Arbiter represented. An endless, silent, orderly world was a hell far worse than any seal. This cannot be permitted, Shukaku snarled. The world is a thing of chaos, of sand, of change. I will not be erased by some walking piece of celestial geometry. Gaara's eyes widened. He had heard the entire exchange in his head. For the first time, he and the demon within him were in perfect, terrified agreement. Suna will be your ally, Gaara said, his voice firm. He had made his decision. We will prepare. When you call, we will answer. It was the first victory in their shadow war. Their next target was Yugito Ni of Kumogakure, the Jinchuriki of the Two Tails, Matabi. The journey to the Land of Lightning was perilous, taking them through hostile territory. Kumo was a proud, militaristic village with a long-standing grudge against Konoha. They found Yugito not in the village, but in a secluded valley where she trained. She was a fierce, confident kunoichi, her every movement radiating power. When they approached her, she met them not with words, but with a wall of brilliant blue fire. Konoha dogs, she spat, landing gracefully. Jiraiya of the Sannin, Kakashi of the Sharingan, and the traitorous Nine-Tails brat. Give me one reason why I shouldn't incinerate you where you stand. Jiraiya's attempts at diplomacy failed. Kakashi's reasoning was dismissed. Yugito was a warrior. She respected only strength. Fight me, Naruto said, stepping forward. If I can earn your respect, you will listen. Yugito laughed, a sharp, dangerous sound. You have a death wish, boy. The battle was a whirlwind of fire and fury. Yugito was fast, powerful, and her control over her Biju's power was incredible. She transformed, becoming a raging beast of blue-black flame. Naruto was pushed back, his normal abilities completely outmatched. To win her respect, he had to meet her on her own terms. He unleashed a partial transformation, a single wing of shadow erupting from his back to absorb her fire. His celestial light flaring to heal the burns that got through. They fought, monster to monster, not as enemies, but as forces of nature clashing. He didn't try to defeat her. He pushed her to a standstill, demonstrating a power that was equal, yet fundamentally different from her own. As they stood, panting and surrounded by a circle of scorched earth, Naruto spoke to the beast within her. Matabi, the Lady of Flames, a new enemy comes, one that would extinguish all fire, all life, all chaos. They are the coming silence. He felt her Biju's acknowledgement, a wave of cold, feline fury. Before Yugito could give her answer, the sky above them was filled with a new sound. The flapping of a massive clay bird. Well, what do we have here? A voice called down, dripping with arrogant amusement. 2 Jinchuriki in one place. My art is about to have a truly explosive debut, Deidara of the Akatsuki descended on his bird, his partner Sasori a silent, hunched figure behind him. They had been tracking Yugito, and had stumbled into a jackpot. The Nine-Tails first, Sasori's gruff, disembodied voice stated. He is the priority. Clay bombs rained down. The fight was instant and chaotic. Naruto, Jiraiya, Kakashi, and Yugito were thrown into a desperate, impromptu alliance against two of the Akatsuki's most destructive members. It was a battle against ardent puppets. Explosions and 1,000 hidden poisons. They were outmatched and on the defensive. To escape, they needed an opening, a massive one. Kakashi was pinned down by Sasori's third cage puppet. Jiraiya was fending off a swarm of clay explosives, and Yugito was battling Deidara in the sky. Naruto saw their only way out. A gorge lay to the east, but a platoon of Kumo border guards, drawn by the commotion, was blocking the path, preparing to engage them all. They were in the way. The old Naruto would have tried to save them. The new Naruto, the one forged in a white cell and burdened by an impossible war, knew he didn't have the time. Jiraiya, get ready to move, he yelled. He turned to the gorge, to the Kumo shinobi. He held out his hand, and a Rasengan formed, not the balanced one, but one fed almost entirely by the destructive, abyssal half of his soul. It was a sphere of roiling, black energy, a miniature vortex of pure destruction. He slammed it into the cliff face above the Kumo platoon. The rock didn't just shatter. It was annihilated, unmade. An entire section of the cliff dissolved, triggering a massive landslide that buried the gorge and the shinobi within it. Under 1,000 tons of rock and earth. He hadn't attacked them. He had simply removed the ground they stood on. It was a brutal, ruthlessly efficient act. In the chaos of the landslide, their group escaped. The Akatsuki artists cursing their luck as their targets vanished. They regrouped miles away, the adrenaline fading. Yugito stared at Naruto, her golden eyes wide with a new, sober understanding. He wasn't just a powerful kid. He was a leader willing to make the hard, ugly choices she herself had been forced to make countless times. He was one of her own kind. "You're crazy, Nine-Tails brat," she said, a slow smile spreading across her face. "But you're not wrong about this threat. And the Akatsuki are a plague." She looked at him, her respect finally earned. "I won't travel with you. My place is in Kumo. But I will help you. There are others like us. I'll find them. I'll warn them. When the time comes, my fire will be yours." She disappeared into the trees, leaving them standing in the twilight. They had another ally, but the cost had been a piece of Naruto's own soul. That night, looking at a map by the light of a small fire, Naruto felt the change in himself. He was no longer just a fugitive. He was the reluctant king of monsters, gathering his scattered, broken court for a war against both the heavens and the hells of their world. Chapter 8 End. Chapter 9. War on Two Fronts. The months following their escape from Konoha were a desperate, whirlwind tour of the elemental nations. Naruto, Jiraiya, and Kakashi became ghosts, their names whispered in bounty offices and tea houses from the land of wind to the land of water. They were no longer just running. They were building a nation of their own, a secret kingdom of outcasts and monsters. Each encounter with a Jinchuriki was a delicate, dangerous negotiation. They found Roshi, the four-tails Jinchuriki, meditating beside a volcano in the land of Earth. He was an old, stubborn man who had long since abandoned humanity. It was not Naruto's words that convinced him, but a direct communion between the celestial half of Naruto's soul and the proud Monkey King, Son Goku, within Roshi. The Biju, who remembered the age of the Sage of Six Paths, recognized the ancient light in Naruto and pledged his allegiance against the coming sterile darkness. Killer Bee of Kumogakure was another matter entirely. They met him not with a plea, but with a challenge. A rap battle that devolved into a seven-sword-style sparring match, with Jiraiya providing the beats. B, a perfect Jinchuriki who lived in harmony with the Eight Tails, Yuki, saw in Naruto not a monster to be pitied, but an equal. He respected Naruto's power, his flow, and the sheer audacity of his mission. He joined their cause with a fist bump and a booming laugh. Not all of their missions were successful. They arrived in the land of water to find the village of the Six-Tails Jinchuriki, Utakata, in smoking ruins. A single, perfectly sculpted clay spider was the only clue left behind. The Akatsuki had gotten there first. The loss was a cold, hard reminder that they were in a race, and the stakes were the souls of his brethren. Back in Konoha, the village was tearing itself apart. Danzo, using the treason of Naruto and his friends, had consolidated his power. He painted Naruto as a would-be tyrant, a charismatic monster gathering an army of Biju to wage war on the world. Root, once a shadow organization, began to operate in the open, its numbers swelling with shinobi who craved the stability and order Danzo promised. The village was split into two camps. The old guard who saw power as a thing to be controlled, and the younger generation who saw the injustice being done in the name of security. Tsunade, as Hokage, was trapped in the middle, her every move a desperate attempt to prevent a civil war from erupting on the streets of her village. The world changed on a day of unnervingly clear skies. The arbiters, seeing the chaos of the mortal world and the failure of their first agent to contain the anomaly, made their next move. It was not an invasion of crystalline beings. It was something far more insidious. They sent a herald, an emissary to bring their message of absolute order to the world. They chose Danzo Shimura. They appeared to him in the depths of his root headquarters, not as beings of flesh, but as concepts of pure law. They saw his soul, his lifelong obsession with control, his willingness to sacrifice anything for his vision of a perfect, orderly world. He was not a creature of chaos they needed to erase, he was a kindred spirit. They offered him a pact. He would be their agent, their herald on the mortal plane. In return, they would grant him the power to enforce his will. Danzo accepted without hesitation. The power they gave him was not chakra. It was a sliver of their own reality-warping authority. When he next appeared before the Konoha Council, he was a different man. The bandages still covered his eye, but an aura of immense, chilling power rolled off him, an aura that made the very air in the room feel thin and still. His declaration was broadcast to all 5 great nations via a forbidden root communication jutsu. His image appeared in the offices of every cage, every feudal lord. The age of chaotic shinobi and their pet demons is over, his voice echoed, cold and absolute. A new era of perfect, unassailable order is at hand. I am the herald of this new world. We will purge the lands of the Jinchuriki, these abominations of nature, and the ultimate contradiction, Naruto Uzumaki. Any who harbor them, any who resist this purification, will be erased. Join me, and you will have a place in the world to come. Defy me, and you will be rendered down to dust and memory. It was a declaration of war against the entire world. Danzo's purification army, a legion of root agents and shinobi from smaller nations who were tired of the endless conflict, swelled overnight. They were no longer just shinobi. They were zealots, and their herald had the power of a god. In the land of iron, a neutral territory of samurai, an emergency 5-cage summit was called. The atmosphere was thick with fear and distrust. But when Tsunade of Konoha, Gaara of the sand, the Raikage of the cloud, the Tsuchikage of the earth, and the Mizukage of the mist gathered, they found themselves facing the same existential threat. It was Gaara who spoke first, revealing his secret alliance with Naruto. The Raikage, having been briefed by Yugito and Killer Bee, reluctantly confirmed the truth of Naruto's cause. Faced with an enemy who could unmake reality and a rival organization in the Akatsuki trying to steal the very weapons they needed to fight, the Cage made a decision that would change the world forever. They formed the allied shinobi forces. And their first official act was to declare an alliance with the rogue ninja Naruto Uzumaki and his faction of Jinchuriki. The world had drawn its battle lines. The first great battle took place on the desolate plains on the border of the Land of Wind. The vast allied shinobi forces, a sea of different forehead protectors and colored flak jackets, stood on one side. On the other, the stark, white and black army of the purifiers, their faces hidden behind emotionless masks. At the head of the alliance was Naruto. He stood on a rocky outcrop, no longer a genin, no longer a fugitive, but the supreme commander of this desperate, final war. His senses, enhanced by his Nephilim nature, stretched across the entire battlefield. He could feel the thrum of every shinobi's chakra, the nervous energy of the army at his back, and the cold, sterile void of the enemy before them. Around him stood his fellow Jinchuriki, an honor guard of living weapons. Naruto commanded, his voice ringing out across the command post. You and Gyuki are the vanguard. I need a Biju bomb, aim for their center flank. We need to break their formation before they can establish a foothold. All right, the great Killer Bee is on the scene. Gonna drop a bomb that's gonna be mean. Be wrapped, before transforming into the mighty 8 tails. The battle began with a roar and an earth-shattering explosion. It was a maelstrom of elemental jutsu, flashing steel, and desperate war cries. Naruto directed his forces like a master conductor, seeing the entire symphony of war at once. He saw a weakness in the right flank and sent Roshi and the Four Tails to plug it with a wall of lava. He saw a squad of enemies trying to teleport behind their lines and had Yagura, the Three Tails, create a vast field of disorienting coral to trap them. In the heart of the maelstrom, in the relative quiet of the command tent, a figure appeared beside him. It was Hinata Hyuga. She was no longer a shy academy student, but a full Jonin, her expression calm and focused, her Byakugan blazing. She didn't offer words of encouragement or a confession of love. She offered something far more valuable. Their commander, the one giving the orders, is 2 miles northeast of your position, she said, her voice steady. He is surrounded by a field that distorts space. I can't see him clearly, but I can see the lines of his power. She looked at Naruto, her pale eyes filled with a fierce, unwavering trust. Your eyes see the truth of this war, Naruto-kun. My eyes see its shape. Let me be your sight. Naruto looked at her, and for the first time in months, a genuine, grateful smile touched his lips. He nodded. Stay close. The battle raged, a stalemate of unimaginable destruction. Then, a third power entered the field. From the east, a hawk made of ink and chakra soared overhead. Sasuke Uchiha, flanked by his team Taka, appeared on the battlefield. He was clad in white, the sword of Kusanagi at his hip, his eyes holding the cold, sharp light of the Mangekyo Sharingan. He was not there for the alliance. He was not there for the purifiers. Danzo Shimura. Sasuke's voice was a low, hateful whisper that carried on the wind. The man who helped orchestrate the death of my clan. I have come for your life. His team, Suigetsu, Karen, and Jugo, engaged the purifier forces with a brutal efficiency, carving a path of chaos directly towards Danzo's command. The battlefield, already a maelstrom, was thrown into a three-way war. Alliance, purifiers, and Taka. Protection, order, and revenge. Danzo, from his command post, watched the chaos unfold. He looked at the charging form of Sasuke, the last Uchiha. He looked at the distant figure of Naruto, the Nephilim commanding an army of demons. All contradictions, gathered in one place, Danzo murmured, a sliver of the Arbiter's power beginning to coalesce around him, warping the very air. Perfect. The purification can begin in earnest. Across the blood-soaked plains, through the haze of smoke and the screams of the dying, the three of them, Naruto, the savior of monsters, Danzo, the herald of order, and Sasuke, the ghost of vengeance, locked eyes. The battle was no longer for territory. It was for the soul of their world. And it had just begun. Chapter 9 End. Chapter 10. The Ashen Crown. The Battle Fee. LD was a triptych of ideologies painted in blood and chakra. In the center, Danzo's purifiers, a tide of black and white, moved with the unnerving, synchronized perfection of a machine, their every AC. Chion dictated by the will of their herald. On the west, the chaotic, vibrant colors of the allied shinobi forces fought with the desperate fury of a world trying to preserve its right to be flawed. And to the east, a sliver of pure, vengeful darkness, Taka cut a bloody path through both armies, their only objective the man who had stolen their leader's past. It was a war on three fronts, a conflict destined to consume itself. Naruto, from his vantage point, saw it all. He saw a squad of Iwa Nin get erased by Danzo's spatial warping. He saw Sasuke's Amaterasu consume a group of Kumo shinobi who stood between him and his target. This wasn't a battle, it was a self-destructing engine. Hinata, with me, he commanded, his voice sharp. Everyone else, focus on the purifiers. Stall them. Do not engage Taka unless you have to. I'm ending this. He moved, a blur of orange and black, Hinata a shadow of pale lavender at his side. He didn't charge into the heart of the fight. He intercepted its cause. He appeared between Danzo and Sasuke, a rock in the middle of a raging river. Enough, he roared, his voice amplified by a surge of power that rippled across the field. Danzo stopped, his one eye regarding Naruto with cold curiosity. Sasuke skidded to a halt, his Chidori crackling, his Mangekyo Sharingan spinning with hateful light. Get out of my way, Naruto, Sasuke snarled. My fight is with him. Your fight is with everyone. Naruto shot back. You're killing shinobi of the alliance. Our allies. They are obstacles, Sasuke dismissed, as if speaking of stones in his path. From behind them, Danzo laughed, a dry, grating sound. See, the chaos, the emotion, the pointless obsessions with revenge and friendship. This is the sickness I have come to cure. He raised a hand, and the very ground beneath them began to ripple, the earth and rock transmuting into a smooth, white, crystalline surface. My masters, the arbiters, will cleanse this flawed reality. They will create a world of perfect silence and order. No more pain, no more loss, no more choice. He offered them a vision, a telepathic image broadcast into their minds, a silent, gray world of perfect geometric shapes, where beings moved in flawless synchronicity, their wills subsumed into a single, orderly consciousness. It was a world without war, yes, but it was also a world without life. A perfect, beautiful tomb. Join me, Danzo offered. Your powers, Uchiha and Nephilim, are based on fundamental principles of reality. You have a place in the new world. Help me purify the chaos. I'd rather burn in my own hell than live in your perfect heaven. Sasuke spat, and he lunged, his body erupting in the spectral purple ribs of his Susanoo. The fight was joined, a god puppet, a vengeful ghost, and a paradox, all clashing at the epicenter of the war. Danzo was terrifying. He didn't fight with jutsu, he rewrote the rules of the battlefield. He turned the air into a thick, viscous liquid to slow Sasuke's attacks. He inverted gravity in a localized field, sending Naruto hurtling into the sky. Sasuke's Susanoo was an avatar of pure destruction, its ethereal sword carving swaths through Danzo's constructs. Black flames of Amaterasu coated the ground, a fire that could not be extinguished. Naruto was the fulcrum. He unfurled his wings of light and shadow, using his abyssal power to create pockets of pure chaos that disrupted Danzo's orderly reality warping, causing his constructs to flicker and fail. He used his celestial light to form shields, the only thing that could withstand the black flames of Amaterasu, protecting the Alliance shinobi who were being caught in the crossfire. He was fighting a war on two fronts, against two absolutes, perfect order and perfect hatred. He couldn't win, not alone. He saw his opening. Sasuke's Susanoo had driven Danzo back, but the Herald was already reweaving reality, preparing a counterattack that would crush the spectral warrior. Naruto flickered, appearing directly in front of Sasuke. Inside the Susanoo's protective aura, Sasuke's immediate reaction was to swing his sword. I told you to get out of my way. And I'm telling you to open your eyes, you idiot. Naruto yelled, his golden wing flaring to block the blow. Your revenge means nothing if this entire world is erased. Danzo is a puppet, a glorified doorman holding the gate open for the real monsters. I saw one, Sasuke. I fought one. Your Susanoo, your Amaterasu, it will mean nothing to them. He wasn't pleading. He wasn't begging for his friend to come home. He was a commander stating a tactical reality. Help me stop the puppet, Naruto said, his mismatched eyes boring into Sasuke's. Help me shut the gate. After that, your vengeance is your own. I won't stand in your way. Sasuke stared at him, his Mangekyo spinning. He saw the truth in Naruto's words. He felt the terrifying, alien nature of Danzo's power. He saw the futility of his quest in the face of cosmic annihilation. His hatred for Danzo was a supernova. But even a supernova is just a speck of dust in an infinite, dying universe. He gave a sharp, almost imperceptible nod. Get him in my range. It was the briefest of truces. An alliance of convenience born of a common apocalypse. But it was enough. What followed was a symphony of impossible power. Naruto became the spearhead. He flew at Danzo, not attacking, but disrupting. He radiated chaos, his abyssal wing unraveling Danzo's power at a conceptual level. Sasuke followed in his wake, his Susanoo now protected from the reality warping effects. He fired a black arrow of Amaterasu from his Susanoo's bow. Danzo erected a wall of distorted space to stop it, but Naruto was already there, his hand plunged into the wall, his chaotic energy making it flicker. The black arrow passed through and struck Danzo's shoulder. The herald screamed, a sound of pure agony as the inextinguishable flames took hold. For the first time, he was truly wounded. They cornered him, the two of them. The living paradox and the ghost of a dead clan. Naruto pinned him with a pressure of light and shadow, holding him in place. This is for my clan. Sasuke roared, his Susanoo's sword plunging down. The blow was final, but Danzo did not die like a man. As the sword struck, his body erupted in a pillar of blinding, pure white light that shot into the heavens, a beacon in the dark sky. He looked up, a final, triumphant smirk on his face. "The gate is open," he whispered, and his body dissolved into motes of pure law. The battle below fell silent. Every soldier, alliance and purifier alike, stared at the pillar of light. It pulsed once, twice, and then the sky tore open. It was not a crack. It was a perfect, seamless rift, a wound in the fabric of reality that revealed a realm of impossible, silent geometry beyond. From the rift, they descended. A legion of crystalline arbiters, their forms blotting out the sun, their collective presence a wave of cold, silent pressure that washed over the world. The lead arbiter, a being the size of a mountain, a god of pure mathematics, descended before them. Its voice was not a sound, but a wave of telepathic truth that why living mind on the planet heard simultaneously. This reality is a flaw, a chaotic equation with no elegant solution. Your existence, Nephilim, is the final proof of this corruption. We have come to correct the error. The purification is at hand. The arbiter turned its silent, conceptual gaze to Naruto. You alone embody the principle of balance, though you are a corrupted form. You are an anomaly, but you are of a higher order. Abandon this flawed plane. Join us. Ascend. You will be a guardian in the perfect, orderly reality to come. All else will be erased. It was the ultimate choice. Godhood or humanity. A perfect, lonely eternity, or a final, doomed stand with his flawed, chaotic world. Naruto looked at the terrified faces of the shinobi behind him. He looked at Sasuke, who stood ready to fight a battle he knew he couldn't win. He looked at Hinata, her Byakugan wide but her stance unwavering. He saw all the chaos, the pain, the love, the hatred, the beautiful, ugly, imperfect mess of it all. He turned back to the arbiter, and he smiled. "Thanks for the offer," he said, his voice ringing with a strength that pushed back against the arbiter's silent pressure. "But I already have a home." He unfurled his wings, the light and shadow burning brighter than ever before. He was refusing godhood. He was choosing them. So be it. The correction begins. The arbiters descended, but as they did, a roar went up from the ground below. A roar from 10,000 shinobi, from 8 Jinchuriki, from the last Uchiha. It was a final, defiant cry. Naruto knew he couldn't destroy them. They a fundamental constant of the universe. But as the Uzumaki murals had taught him, a warden does not destroy. A warden creates balance. "Sasuke," Naruto yelled, "I need an anchor. Pin me to this world." Sasuke understood. He activated his Susanoo, but not for attack. The giant purple warrior knelt, placing its hands on Naruto's shoulders, its immense chakra holding him fast to the mortal plane. "Everyone," Naruto roared to the Jinchuriki. "Give me your power. All of it." A torrent of multicolored Biju chakra flowed into him. The sand of Shukaku, the blue fire of Matabi, the lava of Son Goku. He became a living conduit, a nexus of all the world's chaotic, spiritual energy. He raised his hands to the sky, to the rift. He was no longer a shinobi performing a jutsu. He was a warden enacting a law. He did not try to close the rift. He began to weave it. He pulled the threads of his own soul, the light of the celestial, the dark of the abyssal, and cast them into the tear in reality. He was creating a new seal. The ultimate fuinjutsu, with the cosmos as the scroll and his own soul as the ink. He pulled the concept of order from the arbiter's realm and wove it together with the boundless chaos of his own world. He was not destroying them. He was forcing them into a pact. A new, fundamental law that bound their two planes together in a permanent, unchangeable equilibrium. They could no longer erase his world, because it was now intrinsically, eternally linked to their own. The power required was unimaginable. The feedback was catastrophic. His celestial wing of light burned with an impossible brightness, then crumbled into a shower of glowing embers. His abyssal wing of shadow solidified into black stone, then cracked and fell away, shattering on the ground. The price of the seal was a piece of himself. The rift in the sky did not close. It transformed, the silent geometry within it softening, the edges blurring until it became indistinguishable from the star-filled sky of their own world. The arbiters froze. Their descent halted. now bound by a law even they could not break. Slowly, they faded, retreating back into their now connected, but separate, realm. The sky was clear. The war was over. The world was silent, staring in awe at the boy who stood, scarred and asymmetrical, in the arms of the Susano. Months later, peace, a true and lasting peace, had begun to settle over the nations. The allied shinobi forces was no longer a temporary military pact, but the foundation of a new world government. Sasuke had left. His revenge was complete, but his soul was empty. He walked away from the battlefield not as a traitor, but as a wanderer, searching for a new path. He and Naruto had not said goodbye. They had simply shared a look, an understanding that their bond was no longer one of rivalry or even friendship, but of something deeper, forged in the fires of a cosmic war. Naruto stood on the Hokage monument, looking out over a village that was rebuilding. He was the undisputed hero of the world, its protector. Tsunade remained Hokage, but Naruto was its warden. He was still a paradox, a fusion of three worlds, but he was no longer a secret. He was a symbol. His back felt strange, unbalanced, with only one remaining shoulder blade where two wings once sat. It was a permanent reminder of the choice he had made. He had been offered a perfect, divine crown, and he had refused it. In its place, he wore the scars of his victory, a heavy, unseen, and altogether human crown of ash. The world was safe. His watch was just beginning. Chapter 10 End.